ahead.
We're going to call this meeting to order, but City of Lebanon Budget Committee meeting, April 29th, 2024, and we'll start with roll call.
Mayor Jacola,
Present.
Council President Steinhabel, Councilor Dykstra, Councilor Mann, Councilor Selvage,
Here.
Councilor Olfers,
Here.
Councilor Workman,
Here.
Committee Member Lance Caddy, Dominic Condi, Rebecca Grizzle,
Here.
Jeffrey King, Robert Waterhouse, Tom Wells.
Thank you. All right, approval of minutes. First set of minutes of the fiscal year 23-24 Budget Committee meeting minutes. Is there any additions, corrections, or is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, minutes are approved as submitted. Second minutes are 2024, April 3rd, 2024 Budget Committee and Urban Renewal Agency minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, those minutes are approved as submitted. Before we start presentations, Brandon Niche is going to start us off with a little presentation of his own.
Yeah, so actually I'm going to punt this off to the Lebanon Downtown Association. They're going to give a little presentation on some stuff that we'll talk about tomorrow regarding the motel tax fund. But there is a portion of the funds in that fund that are designated to the Lebanon Downtown Association and the Chamber of Commerce. So LDA is here to present to you today, and I'll go ahead and have them come up and go through their presentation, and then I'll come back and we'll kick off department presentations.
Thank you very much for having us here. We appreciate it. Evidently, the date got mixed up. It was supposed to be tomorrow, but I'm here today because I took vacation and blah, blah, blah. So yes, I'm the representative from the Lebanon Downtown Association. I'm the president. This is Chris Brashears from Boulder Falls, who's the vice chair of the Downtown Association. And we are here asking for support from the city of Lebanon for this next fiscal year. Leadership, as you well know, we have a new board of directors, and we have a very strict policies that we follow, as well as a very strict budget. We were recently able to hire a new part-time executive director, and the hiring of this executive director fulfilled the requirements or part of the requirements of the Main Street Oregon. The Lebanon Downtown Association will continue and grow our marketing aspect to include starting a membership drive for Friends of Downtown. And we are also in the process of getting sponsorships from the Lebanon community. We continue in our leadership of Concerts in the Park series, the Lebanon Downtown Wine Walk, First Fridays, Framed Art in Strawberry Plaza, Downtown Trick or Treat, and Flags Along Main Street. Movies in the park as well, and the mural projects in downtown. This next fiscal year, we will be adding some new fundraisers to help us achieve some more financial freedom. And they will include a Halloween Hustle 5K, which will be the same route as the Walk a Mile 5K that we used for the Walk a Mile for a Child. We're going to be doing a classic car show and a pub crawl. Economic vitality is going to be huge in the next 2 to 3 years. This element of the Main Street 4 Points concentrates on strengthening the Lebanon downtown and the existing economic base while finding ways to expand its economy and introduce compatible new uses. This work is rooted in a commitment in making the most of our community's unique sense of place and existing historic assets, harnessing local economic opportunity, and creating a supportive business environment for small businesses and entrepreneurs. The goal of the Downtown Board of Directors over the next 2 to 3 years, is we want to be completely self-sufficient. And we realize that it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of determination, but with planning and our processes in place with this new board, we feel that we can make it achievable. Any questions?
Clarifying you're requesting funds
Yes, we are requesting funds,
and how much?
30,000.
And that's what we've given in the years past, and so far this year, it's not been allocated, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions? So, Brandon, do we need to have discussion on this and make a decision now, or what? This is appeal to the Budget Committee, correct? Or is this appeal to City Council?
So this is in your budget as part of the motel tax fund, and I don't have the page number in front of me, unfortunately. I can grab that in just a second. So really, it's an appeal to the Budget Committee. At this point, my recommendation would be to hold on to this info so that tomorrow, when we go through the motel tax fund and its ins and outs, you have an idea of kind of what it is that
Yeah,
is funding the Lebanon Downtown Association.
yep.
And certainly if you have any questions for them, now's a good time to ask. But yes, it's a $30,000 line item in that fund. It has been granted annually. Right now, the contract with them through the end of this current fiscal year distributes those funds on a quarterly basis. And we are down to, I think, our last quarterly distribution, which we anticipate will be doled out here in the next couple of weeks. So really, this is information for kind of tomorrow's session and a continuating line item in that fund.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
No, just a clarification. It's on page 246 for those that want to peek in their hard copy budget.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry, I don't know, I can sit and talk to everybody into the world and I get in front of this microphone and get all nervous. I don't understand why. You can ask the chief. I don't have a problem talking ever. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to you, Brandon.
All right, I will keep this rolling. So the purpose of today's meeting is to go through all the departments, give you an idea of what it is that is included within your budget documents. Each of the department directors is here. I think we're missing one, maybe two temporarily. But we should be able to get through everything. And if you have questions, now's a great time to ask them. They are the professionals related to their budgets. They know the ins and outs. They know their departments from up and down. So if you have questions, I would certainly recommend asking them today. I believe that they will be back tomorrow as well. If you do have any kind of underlying questions as you go through the evening and you think, oh, I should have asked that, they'll be here tomorrow for you as well. But we're going to go through, they each have probably 5 to 10 minutes worth of presentation and then certainly questions afterwards. So unless anybody has any questions about the process, we'll go ahead and get started. Ron will take it away.
Thank you, Brandon and Budget Committee members. First fund we're going to talk about today is the City Manager's Office. And what does the City Manager's Office do? That's a good question. I'm still trying to figure that out. No. In truth, the City Manager oversees the day-to-day operations of the city. Basically work directly with the department directors in collaboration with the department directors to execute policies and objectives of the city council. The operations budget, I don't have the page number of that on there, but the operations budget is the same this year as it was last year, $14,160. That includes items such as Chambers Visitor Guide, some other things, dues and subscriptions to various organizations, a little bit for meetings and conferences that come up throughout the year. So that's what that includes there.
If I can interject real fast, 64, page 64, if you have a paper
Brandon.
document in front of you.
So one item to note from this year is that the budget for the permanent city manager only includes 6 months worth of salary. So that really wouldn't take into account until January 1 of this coming fiscal year, which means that I'll probably be stuck doing this unless they get tired of me, which could happen real easy. then you wouldn't have a new city manager come in until, it looks like about January, which kind of falls in line with the city council objectives of starting back up in July to go through the hiring process. So to keep that in mind. Another thing that's important, we're changing the way we do some of the our outreach to try and hone in on getting more grants. There's a lot of grants out there. They take a lot of staff time. So we're doing things this year, and I'll talk more about it as we get into the engineering piece of this. And we're contracting with Oregon Council.
Cog,
Yeah, thanks.
Council of Governments.
Council of Governments. They're writing a couple of grants for us. They're looking for grants for us in multiple areas. We're also looking at ways that we can engage our state and federal legislatures a little bit more, and stay tuned for that. We've got some ideas coming up here in the near future where we believe that as a town of 20+ thousand that we need to be basically, for lack of better terms, lobbying and having our voice heard, Lebanon's voice heard, and will also help us with funding as we go through the future. But that's kind of what the city manager's office does. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Aware of what you do wrong. Other than keeping that interim part off there, I don't really have any questions.
So one highlight we'd like to make for this budget is, Ron alluded to it regarding the timing of the city manager. The additional dollars that will be necessary in the future for this, because this is only a half-year funded position currently in your proposed budget, will be about $133,000 in future fiscal years, plus any, cost of living adjustments to the salary range and benefit changes. So this is something that, yes, we are saving some dollars in the 25 budget as a result of only having a half year city manager potentially, but this will be something that will add additional costs in future years as we go through this.
I feel like 133, is that realistic?
Meaning,
So future,
that's the additional, that would be
That's the
additional.
additional.
oh, additional.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's already funded at 133,000 for this coming year. The total budget for this position is about 266,000 a year.
Thank you.
Anything else? That wasn't 5 to 10 minutes. I can spend more time talking, or?
No, you can't.
I'll make it up for it, and when we get to engineering, I'm sure.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next presentation will be by the city recorder to handle the city recorder's office as well as the mayor and city council budget. You can find these in your document. Page 60 is mayor and city council, and page 69 is for the city recorder, and I'll hand it off to Julie.
Thank you again. Good afternoon, council members and members of the Budget Committee. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Julie Fisher, and I am the city recorder. I have been in this position for just a little under a year. I absolutely love being with the City of Lebanon and part of the director team here. The budgets I would like to review today encompass the mayor and city council and the recorder's budget. The mayor and city council budget for fiscal year 2025 proposed $99,243, which is a slight increase from last year. This covers council tablets, stipends, conferences, and memberships such as the Oregon Mayors Association, the League of Oregon Cities, and the Oregon Cascade West Council of Governments. Excuse me. There is a slight increase due to raised membership fees and cost of materials. Funding for the Meal on Wheels program is also in this budget. Are there any questions of the council budget?
Could you, the last part, the Meals on Wheels, could you explain that part?
Sure. Is it a pass-through? Or is it actually? So I think there's $4,000, which has not changed. The request has not changed. It's the same as it's been in past years.
Okay.
The city contributes $4,000 to that program, and they come out and use the senior center kitchen to provide meals for seniors and folks within our
Gotcha,
community.
thank you.
Why does that make sense to be in this part of the budget?
It has always been a part of the council budget because it's kind of a grant kind of issued by the council in years past. So it's included as part of that component. It could go into, certainly either the city manager's budget or non-departmental, but it's just been in the council budget in the past. Yes. Yes. Yeah, the reason for the change, so the Admin Internal Services Fund is supposed to be the fund that houses all of the organizational support departments. And the thought process there is that the city council provides oversight, leadership, decision-making, policy creation for all of our departments. And so instead of having it as a general fund item, putting it in the admin internal service fund means that all the departments are contributing to those expenses, and kind of sharing that wealth, so to speak. Yeah, the plan would be that would continue if it meets with this committee's approval.
Any other questions? The city recorder's office acts as support to the city council and department heads. What page is this on? And this is on page 69. Positions in this office are the city recorder and deputy city recorder. Duties include meetings, which are agendas, minutes, meeting notices, ordinances and resolutions, codification of the Lebanon Municipal Code, public records request, liquor license application processing, press releases, maintaining boards and committee memberships, social media postings, archiving, website administration, and tracking and archiving all city agreements and contracts. The city recorder is also the elections official. Some changes to the fiscal year 2025 budget include an increase in election funds due to expected publications related to the ballot titles and upcoming election notices. Membership fees have slightly increased as well as office supplies. The most significant change, though, is the decrease in personnel. In fiscal year 2025, the deputy city recorder will become a 0.5 FTE position. In anticipation of this change, our office has been streamlining operations, added an agenda builder software, and changing processes to become more efficient. Job duties between the two positions have been shifted, so current levels of service should not be affected by the decrease in hours to part-time. With these changes, the city recorder budget is reduced from fiscal year 2024 by over $75,000 and presented as $213,109, a reduction in over 26%. Are there any questions for the city recorder budget?
I have one. I think you might have said this, but did you say the increase in materials and services was due to the upcoming ballot item we're putting on the ballot?
There is an increase, and that's in the, I think we put it in elections and advertising, and that's due to the ballot titles and the election publications.
I'm just looking at the difference between 23 and 25, and it's doubled. Is that mostly due to the budget, or sorry, the ballot?
It would also be,
Agenda builder?
Yeah.
The agenda builder that I spoke of is software that's also included in this. And we also increased it just slightly for,
yeah, so what we've done with a lot of the software budgets, and this department is no exception, is increased slightly for, usually our software contracts have some sort of escalator in them. So the city recorder's office utilizes a state partnered program for records management that we budgeted an increase in. The agenda builder is a new piece of software that they're going to utilize. Again, part of that efficiency building that does have a cost associated with it.
And
but
that's a subscription, or is that a one-time?
it's a subscription.
it's an annual subscription. I believe it's $6,500 per year.
Okay.
And then the rest of that budget is like Julie mentioned, advertising and stuff like that. So most of those costs have been held steady for the year. except for otherwise the small elections increases.
Any other questions for? Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
All right, before we go on to the next one, I want to note for the record that Counselor Steinhabel has been here since Brandon began his presentation, just because she missed roll call.
Thank you. My apologies for being late. I had a meeting run late.
We're glad you made it.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, next up will be community development, and Kelly Hart, our community development director, will handle her presentation. This begins on page 73 of your budget, if you have a printed copy.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm the Community Development Director for the city. We have, within my department, there's generally 3 divisions, the Planning, Building, and Economic Development Division. We're covered generally under 4 funds. Largely, it is 51% out of the Building Fund, and then 41% out of the general fund, and then the remainder, small portions out of the water and wastewater utility fund for the support that our staff provides for those funds. For this year, you will see a small increase in expenditures year over year. That is largely for 2 factors. One is our anticipated increases associated with our building fund contracts. We have not increased our building contract services since 2015. We are still under negotiations with that contract before the City Council in May. We are also proposing to increase our building fees, which we have not done since 2016. And so the anticipated increases to building service fees will be correlated with building inspection fees increases as well. But since we are still under contract negotiations, we have identified an increase that we are estimating, but that will be adjusted next year to be more appropriate based off of the final contract terms. The second large adjustment is we did receive a new community development block grant. And so a large distribution is anticipated over the next year. And so this last year we were winding down the grant. And so you received a smaller allocation this last year. This next year you see a larger allocation. So that's the larger swing in our budget. Generally speaking, as I said, we cover planning, building, and economic development services. For planning services this next year, we will continue to provide our general current planning services. For new development, we are seeing a slowdown of development applications coming in, but we are seeing larger applications. Our planning commission just processed 122 unit subdivision applications, so we are seeing these larger developments that we're seeing. But we are also processing long-range planning services this next year with improvements to our development code associated with grant applications that we received through the Department of Land Conservation and Development to implement our housing production strategy update. Another thing that our planning department will be working on is associated with what came out of our large meeting that we just had this last Friday with the state and the Department of Land Conservation and Development. We will be having a large amount of follow-up from that meeting, and there will be a significant amount of meetings and collaboration with the state over this next year associated with that. That will take a lot of time from the planning department as well. In terms of economic development services, due to the budget reductions, we do have a reduction of 1 FTE. That staff person did leave the department halfway through this fiscal year, so we have been without that FTE since the end of January. So we have been in the process of winding down our economic development services. What that has looked like is a reduction of touch points with our business community and providing direct business resources. We are also not doing direct business recruitment as often. And we are still identifying what that wind down is looking like and how we can still provide economic development services to the best of what we can with the capacity that we have. We're also trying to figure out how we can maximize the staff that we have and see how we can reorient some of the work and utilize the existing staff to the best of our abilities. We are also using our regional partners as the best of our ability through our Rural Economic Alliance and the Oregon Cascade West Council of Governments to provide economic development services, and our partners like the Chamber of Commerce to expand our economic development opportunities to offset what we are going to be missing as part of no longer providing those services within the city itself. So you will see the reduction of that staff member as part of our budget for economic development. And that is reflected in the budget. And then overall, I just kind of wanted to provide as part of the budget what our general staffing looks like within the community development department to demonstrate we do a lot with a little. We provided a staffing analysis of comparable cities. And we have the lowest staffed department by a large comparable in comparison to our comparable cities. And we are still functioning at a high level and still producing at an extreme quantities. So kudos to the staff that provide the support to the department. I thank them greatly. They do an amazing job, and we wouldn't be here without them. So I'm here to answer any questions.
That staff comparable is very helpful, so thank you for doing that in advance.
And page 80 in your document kind of goes into a little more detail and actually has a few more cities allocated in that list as well. This is going to be a reoccurring theme, I think you'll find, as you were reading through the budget and as you hear from the department directors today. Part of what we have focused on in this budget is what reductions can we make that will still allow for services to continue, albeit with maybe some minor changes, but that don't necessarily eliminate entire functions or change dramatically how we provide service to the community. I think this is one of the kind of oddball adjustments, I will say, in that you are seeing kind of the economic development division wind down a little bit because there was one whole person dedicated to that, and now that will fall squarely on the existing staff of the community development department or the director herself to provide those services. And so there will be some kind of revision in how that works. So again, a reoccurring theme, but page 80 kind of spells out, what we have as far as FTE and what other communities have, just for comparison's sake.
So this comparison, so our building inspector.
Yes. So each city has a different makeup of how they do things. Some cities have building inspectors, some cities have in-house. In the staffing spreadsheet that I provided on page 80, I tried to do it apples to apples the best that I possibly can to where I did it person to person. And so, for example, the city of Canby provides a contract with the county. So in the comparable, I identified that they don't actually have building staff in-house. They do it outside of county. So they're not included in the FTE per population basis. All of these cities here provide some level of building staff in-house, whether that's contract staff or that's in-house. For the city of Lebanon, I counted our contract employee as an employee of the city of Lebanon.
Kelly, I wish I could give you a page number, but it's the first spreadsheet in the expenditures. And I think you alluded to this, the block grant, is that why the materials and services is showing 361 in 25 as opposed to 186 the year
Yes.
before? So that's kind of a net zero. That's not actually, you're not actually taking that much more out of the general fund. That's money coming in that's also being used for something.
Correct. The community development block grant is a grant fund that we have to capture as a contract service, but there is a funding mechanism that is provided for that. So we just have to register it as a contract, but there's money coming in, so it's a net zero.
And also, that's the same idea as with the building inspector. Even though we're paying that contract or contractor more, we're collecting that in fees, so it's also a net zero.
We are collecting fees for it. Our work that we are trying to do is making sure that the fees are going to cover the full cost of the contract, yes.
Yeah, that's the idea. Okay, so I guess in summary, even though it shows that the planning and economic development has a higher budget this year than last year, you're actually affecting the general fund less.
Significantly less. When you take out the community development block grant itself, with the reduction of the staffing, we are, I don't know what you're doing there, buddy. When you take out the reduction of the staffing, we are significantly reducing the actual impact to the general fund.
Okay, that's,
The grant was 440,000 or something like that. Yeah, but we didn't put it fully burdened within this fiscal year. Yeah,
So the materials and service budget that you see, the 361,225, that includes 300,000 for that grant.
Yeah.
So, from a almost apples to apples, you're looking at that 187 for this current year budget, and dropping that down to 61,000.
gotcha. Thank you. Any more questions for?
Are you planning to increase the fees annually to keep up with the inflation that's going on?
we do have a plan as part of the fee proposal for the building fees to put in an index kicker, yes.
I guess that's it. Thank you.
All right. Next up is my own department. So I will get you a page number here. Okay, so finance starts on page 95. The finance office covers a multitude of things. First, I have the actual finance office itself, which covers accounting, accounts payable and receivable. It covers our audit, our annual audit that we have to complete, budget, as you are currently working through now, payroll and utility billing. Additionally, my office includes municipal court. So I oversee the staff and the actual work product of municipal court. The judge that is hired by the city council is outside of that scope. I don't oversee the judge or any of the decision making there. Over time, the finance office has changed a lot. I started here about a year and a half ago now, and we have gone from 5 full-time equivalencies or 5 people in the finance office, and we're down to 4 at this point, and that is part of the reduction that finance is moving forward with as far as this proposal is 1 FTE elimination. We've been through, I would say, a couple of different revisions related to the department and the staffing structure. So this table kind of gives you an idea of when I started in fiscal year 23, there was a director, an accounting supervisor, an accountant, and 2 finance clerks within the finance department, as well as the 3 court staff. In 24, given some of the stuff that our department was going through and some of the projects we had on our docket, when the accounting supervisor left, we decided to switch that over to a payroll specialist, somebody who could dedicate time to getting our new payroll system up and running, who could really focus fully on that implementation and making sure that we fixed some of the problems that we were having. That worked out really well for us. However, again, in a bid to create efficiencies and make sure that we are operating in a manner that is best for the organization and best for the community, we're kind of restructuring again for this budget, and that payroll specialist position, now that our payroll system is up and running, is going away. We're doing away with that FTE, and the accountant, that person actually moved recently into the accountant role after a search. So then from there, in order to make sure that we still had somebody who can do some of the payroll functions, we're reclassifying in this budget a court clerk from a court clerk 1 to a court clerk 2, and half of their responsibilities will include court and half will include payroll. The purpose for the restructure or for the reclassification, I would say, is a number of different reasons. One, we have some veteran staff in the court office that are nearing, as they'll put it, nearing retirement. They've been here a long time. They've dedicated a lot of time and service to this organization, but they have in their minds an end date as to what this looks like. So part of this next year, we will take the time to train up, make sure that this person being reclassified knows the specific duties that some of those staff do currently and is able to take that over when those went through natural attrition when they retire. The other piece of that is then that classification also fits what the payroll specialist classification was as far as a salary grade. And so in order to ensure that payroll still is done every 2 weeks like we have it currently, this person's going to have time support us through payroll. So lots of changes coming in the finance office. At this point, we feel like this is what we can do to still ensure, one, that we get checks out the door, whether that be payroll or accounts payable, and that we still meet the obligations of our office. But I will be honest, it is going to start getting tighter. We currently, the city gets out AP checks, for example, accounts payable checks once a week. We won't be able to do that anymore. I can tell you, at least from my standpoint, with the accounting supervisor not being there, that puts a lot more of a review and onus on the director to perform day-to-day operations. And that's really difficult, especially when we're in budget season and that person's dedicated to producing your budget in collaboration with the city manager. There will be times where things slip a little, but again, it is in keeping with that theme, not going to overall impact the service that we're able to provide. Outside of that, the finance budget is a small decrease this year. If you're looking at starting at page 95, even though we are reducing an FTE, we did bring on some additional software to support as we go through these changes, which we anticipate over time, the change in the software billing versus a personnel cost is going to be significantly less. So while that's only a $25,000 decrease this coming year, we anticipate that over time you'll see kind of that graph of expenditures keeping somewhat steady versus having the additional FTE in there with the salary and benefit costs. We do have some increases related to our audit contract. And again, as part of the revisions to staffing, next year we're going to pay a little bit more, but we are going to have the auditors produce our financial statements. We think that'll do two things. One, that puts the timing on them a little bit more. And we think will actually help move things along a little bit faster. And additionally, that means that the director, myself, can focus more on some of the day-to-day stuff that needs to get out the door. And there's a lot coming for the organization: strategic planning, budget circumstances, and some of the stuff we're going to talk about tomorrow regarding where the organization is as far as expenditures. There's a lot that the director is going to need to focus on. So having the auditors handle the financial statements next year will help accelerate some things that are currently happening. Beyond that, the rest of the expenditures, the expenditure for the municipal court judge is included in this budget as well, even though they are hired by the city council. And then we just have some general software expenditures that we use in our office to handle all the accounting functions. So our Springbrook software, our enterprise resource system, along with ADP for our payroll. And then we already talked about the audit contract. So minor increases, but overall the budget is a decrease just because of that salary or that reduction in FTE. Any questions related to finance? Cool.
Guess not.
I also have non-departmental, since, well, it doesn't really belong to a department, so we'll walk you through that. Really, there isn't a lot to non-departmental. It's kind of a catch-all for stuff that just does not belong necessarily to one singular department. The first thing in that budget is a repayment to the URD. This is a repayment to the Northwest Urban Renewal District in order to meet specific spending requirements. The city had to pay back some money that was previously used outside of kind of the scope of the URD. I don't know how long ago that was. Several years ago, 4 years ago, I guess. So we have to pay an annual contribution to that URD in order to make sure that it doesn't overexpend. And overexpending means that we're not spending more than we are bringing in property tax revenue each year. So that's about $225,000 that we send from the general fund every year that we are trying to accelerate so that we can get the URD to close in future fiscal years. But for now, that is still at that $225,000 number. There is some emergency management expenses there in case whoever comes in or in case the city manager needs a line for some emergency management stuff. There is a partnership right now between some of the government organizations in the Sweet Home and Brownsville area, in addition to Lebanon, where they're kind of tag teaming emergency management, working with I think right now it's at the point where they're working with a contractor to kind of develop an overall plan and establish, what will happen in certain scenarios. So there's kind of this sharing of resources instead of each organization trying to take it on themselves. There is some copier and supplies related to that copier in this budget for the copier located at City Hall. Up in front, it is shared by Finance, Community Development, Human Resources, amongst other departments. The travel station and City Hall, all of the expenditures related to those two locations are in this budget as well. That includes alarm monitoring and security, pesticide service, postage expenses, and then the utilities. So for the travel station here, we have about $10,500 budgeted for utilities. That is only electricity and gas. That doesn't include the water and sewer service for this building. City Hall, $30,000. And again, that is electricity and gas expenses, although I think that building is maybe electric heating. I don't remember. But $30,000 in utilities for that building. And then citywide water and sewer, that is water and sewer expenses for all of our citywide buildings. And that's about $80,000 a year for Public Works, City Hall. Some of our parks will have some, watering and stuff like that, and the restrooms. What else? Senior center, library, all of them. So all of that is contained in one line item, so we don't have to try and split it out every time. That is the bulk of non-departmental. In the past, this budget was significantly higher, and part of that is due to this is where some of the ARPA money was residing and spent out of. And so that's where you'll see some of that. But otherwise, we're expecting kind of an easier year as with some of the changes related to non-departmental expenses. We've kept that as low as possible. Specific questions on non-departmental? Seeing none, we will move to human resources. So I'm going to give you a brief presentation on human resources. Our human resources director, unfortunately, was not able to make it today. And so she should be here tomorrow to answer any questions that you may have specifically about the operations of the department, but I'll give you some brief background related to that budget, and we can go from there. So the Human Resources Department is responsible for the benefits and pay across all of our city departments. They provide a centralized hiring system, maintain our job descriptions. They maintain all of the employee records, which some of those have to be kept for up to 75 years after an employee has departed. So there's a lot of responsibility in regards to records retention there. They assist with grievance and disciplinary action across the organization. They are the primary contact for all negotiations that happen between the city and our two unions, and then provide training and development services for all of our staff. Each month, I don't know what the council gets, but I know like staff, for example, receives training in their inbox that we are encouraged to complete timely. And that's something that is handled by human resources. In that office, in the current year, there was 3 FTE budgeted. We are reducing that in this proposed budget by 2 FTE. So there, in this next year's budget, we've proposed the elimination of an HR generalist. I think it was called a specialist actually for this current fiscal year. And then also eliminating the training and safety coordinator. Both of those are through attrition of sorts. They both moved on to other places, and the vacancies were evaluated and decided that that's something that we can leave out of the budget for now to provide, again, for some of that cost reduction in a manner that does not necessarily impact the overall service. However, again, I will say that is, we're dropping a department down to a singular FTE is never easy for any of our departments. And so having all of that reside on one person, again, just means that things will roll out a little bit slower, or that we may not get to things as quickly as we hope. And that is something that we will just have to be cognizant of as we move forward. Questions that I can maybe answer about the human resources budget, or that we'll punt till tomorrow. All right. With that, I will ask Brent Hurst, our IT director, to come up and discuss with you the information technology budget. You can find this starting at page 104 in your printed copy.
Thank you, Brandon. Well, the IT department and the GIS department, we try and keep all the computers running in the city, and that would include all the departments. So it's police, engineering. We do a contract with fire, public works, library, senior center, the links. We have historically, this past year, we started with 6 full-time employees. Right now, we have 5.8, and the budget, as is constituted right now, includes that 5.8. We have one staff member who dropped down to part-time. Typically, we do, in addition to keeping the hardware refreshed and just operations as usual, we typically do 2 or 3 or 4 bigger projects. Some of the bigger projects this year, we had budgeted for a website, and so we are in the middle of upgrading our website. I hope to have that out. We're working with actually Aaron, who's back at the table here, and Julie are working on that together. That should be rolled out right before July. Cybersecurity is always a big focus. It became a bigger focus coming out of 2020 when everybody went remote, and it's remained a bigger focus. And so we've spent quite a bit of time and effort in that for all departments. Station 31 with fire, this build that they did on Oak Street, we helped them on the IT piece of that. And then the GIS, we have a staff member who has put a lot of time in the last couple of years into improving our GIS services. And the payoff there has been the ability to integrate some of our systems, like our finance system, into, for instance, our work orders for public works. It also provides information that Kelly and Ron present here quite often in council. And I'll highlight one of those as being like the lead and copper survey that came out. And because of the work that had been done in the last couple of years, it allowed our staff to put a survey out there for the public to use. The budget this year is up. It's $1.8 million. It's up 7%. The prime driver for that is actually the proposed council move from this building to the library. what we did was we went out and got estimates from contractors to say, what would it take for a contractor to just come in here and do it? And that is what I worked with Brandon and Ron on. We got direction from council last week on what that chamber is going to look like, and we're continuing to work on that as a project. We have some servers and networking equipment in our data center that were installed about 2017, and that equipment is aging out and needs to be replaced. And then contract services, we have a lot of subscriptions. Jeremy, you've referenced a couple times if software was perpetual or subscription. Everything is going to the recurring software model now, and vendors are starting to force your hand and say, hey, you can no longer buy the software. We're only going to rent it to you. And with that, we're at their mercy when it comes to cost of living, inflationary increases. And we have seen some this year that were a lot higher than the standard 3 to 5% in this year. Those are ones that are going to come up this summer. GIS has been stable, and that's the one area that has been very compartmentalized for us. GIS is so focused. The costs on that have been stable, and we were actually able to trim that. If you look over the last 3 or 4 years, the GIS fund has been rock solid. That is one area that vendors have not given us any pressure at all with upward price movements. So with that, I think I'm ready to answer any questions if I can, or have Brandon help me.
I don't have much to help on. So just for your review sake, so part of the increases you'll see in capital outlay, there are 2 projects happening. So the first one, as Brent discussed, is that relocation of the council chambers from here over to the library. Again, that is still in its preliminary stages. We have budgeted the remaining American Rescue Plan Act funds, ARPA, to handle the IT component of that move. So that is not city resources or taxpayer funds being used for that relocation. It would be, well, I guess it's still taxpayer money, but at the federal level. But so that's federal money that we've received that we have allocated for this project. Additionally, IT is working with Public Works in regards to the 2 treatment plants to complete a SCADA upgrade. And I don't remember honestly what SCADA means. Somebody would have to help me with that acronym. But it is the system that controls the ins and outs of our 2 treatment plants, the water treatment plant and the wastewater treatment plant. The chemical distribution, the levels, the storage, all of that. And Ron might be able to shake that out a little better.
It's the programming that makes everything talk to everything. So it controls your pumps, it controls your levels, it controls dosing for chemicals, allows you to make changes within the system. It basically is how the system is automated, is what they call SCADA.
Those expenses are allocated out. So as part of the internal service funds, and something we'll talk about tomorrow, each of these internal service funds is then kind of doled out to all of the specific funding sources across the city to contribute towards those expenses. For this purpose, for the SCADA project, the wastewater utility fund and the water utility fund are the only two lines that are contributing to that expenditure, right? So it's not, for example, the police department contributing to SCADA, because that's not really appropriate. They don't use that system. So that will go through tomorrow, but just so that you're aware, that is part of what is included in that capital outlay line. The materials and service, one of the things that really drives IT is that you can pretty much blink and everything sitting before you in IT world is probably out of date. At least that's how it feels sometimes, right? And so there's a regular need to upgrade this technology to ensure that we can maintain cybersecurity. You hear all the time of different government organizations that are getting hit these days with either malware or ransomware viruses that can leave us very vulnerable. And our IT team has dedicated significant focus to that over the last several years. And we are one of few cities that has a cybersecurity insurance policy like we do because of the dedication of that team. So we appreciate that, and also contributes then unfortunately to the specific costs that you're seeing in this budget.
I have a quick question. So on the move to possibly the library community room, how old is the equipment in here, and is it something that could be used over there, or is it pretty much aged out at this point? Or I'm just trying to think of any cost savings that could be involved in that.
Absolutely. That's a big question, Michelle. So the budget, when I was talking with Ron and Brandon, includes the cost for a vendor to come in and do it. Just come in and install it new. This system, like the audio system, there are components that are probably about 15 years old or more.
Okay.
And like these mics have gone out, so, we replace one of these every couple of years, or maybe a couple go a year. There is equipment in the rack there that you remember coming out of COVID, we bought that system. So that's the 4 cameras on the wall, but that is 4 years old now. So what's going on that is the software is starting to get outdated. So Andy, my staff and I have been talking with how much of this can we bring it all over, just the whole thing, including the speakers, and put it in that. The challenge is that's a different room. So the echoing is different, the layout is different, and when you get into the audio video, there's a lot of nuances. And so that is something we're testing, and we're trying to work with Ron. What I don't want to do is paint ourselves into the corner and say, hey, we can do this for, $20,000
Sure.
when we have to bring a contractor in to fix it. And so potentially we could probably bring, you potentially could take everything and forklift it over there, and it could work. And that's what we hope to find out. And obviously, the more you do, the lower that cost, the actual cost will be, Michelle.
Okay.
And that will be our intent as well.
Yeah, that's
if
one of
we
the
can.
things that
Perfect,
Brenda and
yeah.
I have talked about is just because you've got the 140,000 budgeted, doesn't necessarily mean we're going to use that, but we have to plan for worst case scenario, and whatever we can take out of here and whatever we can do internally to save on those costs, we will do.
Yeah.
And it's going to take us a bit to figure all that out though.
Okay, just wanted to ask the question. Thank you.
Absolutely, sure.
I want to ask, as somebody who watches all of these meetings, the sound is, I don't care how many times you tell a counselor, please turn your microphone on and speak into the microphone. Everybody, if they sit back here
Yep.
and talk like this, and then if you're watching online, you can hear 0 of that. So unless, I don't know how to solve that. There's no way to force people to talk into the microphone so you can hear it remotely.
Well, there is. You could go with like overhead mics if
That
you
would
want to
be
get technical.
great.
What you jump into there is hot mics, where you
Oh, I'd
walk into
love
a
that.
room and you're mic'd up.
I don't
period.
love that.
So,
Well,
yeah.
I know.
For the record.
I know.
Don't love that at all.
I mean, just for an adventure,
It's
it would
been
be
a
an adventure.
continuing discussion.
I
Do we
just-
want to let everybody, have hot
You
mics
just
all
can't
the
tell
time?
these old men to talk into the microphone.
No, you
It's just
can't.
horrible.
Excuse me.
And now I've said enough. I'm sorry, not you, Michelle.
Okay, thank you.
Since we're talking about those were ARPA funds that you were saying were be used for that move, is there a time limit we have to spend that? And when is the clock up?
Great question. So yes, there is a time limit on those funds. We have to have them encumbered, which means under some agreement signed, ready to roll by the end of this calendar year, December 2024. So we are running out of time in regards to those funds. I think that once we have a better handle on what this project might look like, if it's decided that we're not going to need the entirety of the funds, we certainly have some wastewater or water projects that we could throw that money at in order to enhance the system over there.
That's what I was going to ask. If we do have significant savings in that fund because we're able to do a budget-friendly move, we have a use for that money
Yep.
also. Okay. I have another question for you. I'm looking at the fiscal year 22 actual. So I don't have the budgeted, but I have the actual and personnel services, and I'm comparing that to fiscal year 25 budgeted. It's significant. It's a big change. We're talking about 722,000 for 25 versus 486 actual in 22. I'm assuming we were understaffed at that time, and that's why there's such a big difference, because I can't see what was actually budgeted in 22, or what is that? How many positions is that attributed with?
I believe that includes Aaron. Yeah.
So we did add a position. It was the administrative assistant for the department, which helps with billing, internal support for the director. That's a lot of that driver, not the entirety of it, but after that, there was some redistribution between GIS and the regular IT component for the director. So little modifications that increased that line specifically.
Okay. Are there any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy.
All right. Next, I'll invite Kendra Antilla up to talk about the library. And you can find this in your budget document starting on page 110. And the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. So the library did make some changes in order to reduce the strain on the general fund. We've eliminated one full-time position. That staff member actually got married and moved away in February. So the writing was on the wall at that point. So we did not replace her. We managed the holes in the schedule when she left with the aid of 2 on-call staff members. One of those on-call positions will also come to an end in June due to retirement. So beginning in July, we will cut 6 hours of service per week. We'll accomplish that by closing on Fridays. And we'll also eliminate 1 evening hour on Wednesdays. So that'll bring our total weekly hours of service to the public to 37 hours per week. We specifically chose Fridays because that's a short day for us. We're only open for 5 hours. Also, both Albany and Sweet Home Public Libraries are closed on Mondays, and we get a lot of their patrons, so I didn't want to do it on a Monday. And Wednesday evenings are typically pretty slow, that last hour. The decrease in hours of operation will save 520 staff hours annually. We've also decreased the collections budget by about 15%. The impact from those changes, 1 fewer person and condensing 6 days of service into 5, could result in possibly longer wait times at the front desk. People are waiting to check out, maybe longer time waiting for help if you're at a computer copier. And then programming for adults will decrease pretty significantly, but frankly, we have pretty low turnouts for adult programming. And then the decrease in the collections budget will result in a smaller selection of newspapers and magazines, maybe fewer items on the new shelf. But looking ahead, with the current level of FTEs, we will be able to maintain all youth programming. So that's baby and preschool story times, Lego Day, Crafternoons, the Teen Advisory Group, and all the teen programming. SUGO, which stands for Show Up, Geek Out. That's where we do the STEM programming. And then the big daddy of them all, the summer reading program. We're going to be able to maintain all of that. And that's where we get a lot of bang for our buck. Huge, huge turnouts for those events. I did include 2 infographics in the budget document. One compared our library to other Oregon public libraries with similar service populations, and it shows we are very near the bottom, just 1 up from the bottom, in terms of staffing and funding levels. The other graphic shows, there's the chart, and then the other graphic shows we had almost 71,000 people walk through our door in the past year. So the point is, we have always done more with less, which seems to be a theme that you're hearing today. And my team and I remain committed to offering the best possible service to the citizens of Lebanon. Are there any questions? All right,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, moving right along. Kendra Oliver, I'll bring her up to talk about the senior center. She has two components. So she gets to talk about the senior center and Links Transit. We'll kick off with the senior center, which starts on page 148 of your budget document. And I'll leave it to you.
Good afternoon. Brandon has a slide up there that shows just some slight modifications in FTE for the senior center. Again, I'm the director for the senior center and for Links Transit. So we do have two positions within the two departments that are split, as you see up there, the director and then the coordinator. We're making that slight shift to better reflect time spent within the two departments. We find that a lot of our time is spent with transit just because it's very demanding. So you'll see a little bit of a savings there. This year, we just found out last week that Council of Governments will continue with some of the Older Americans funds for some of our programming. It's not as much as it was last year. It's about $10,000 this year, and Brandon and I might need to make a couple adjustments based on that information. But we're very thankful for that because that allows us to continue with our evidence-based programming at the Senior Center. So we currently offer 4 classes. Evidence-based programming research shows that if people come twice a week for 45 to 60 minutes at a time for 8 to 12 weeks, they'll likely see improved flexibility, strength, all that sort of stuff, which helps reduce falls. All of our programs, we've had a great response. One of our programs, our Jerry Fit Strength and Stretch program, we even started offering it 3 days a week because sometimes we'd have up over 20 people show up. So those programs have been very popular, and we're thankful to COG and their Older Americans Act funds to be able to provide that for the community. This current fiscal year, we also received 10 iPads for the senior center to address isolation and loneliness, to do some hybrid programming, keep people in touch with loved ones. We are not receiving any funding this current fiscal, or excuse me, for 24-25, but we'll continue with that. The bulk of that expense was actually purchasing the iPads. Materials and services will be slightly lower this coming fiscal year. And again, that was primarily due to the purchase of the iPads. We've added a lot of programming this year. Some of our most popular classes were the exercise and wellness classes, line dancing, square dancing. We have 25 plus people in those classes. Our auditorium is full. Everybody's having fun. This fiscal year, we will probably see over 35,000 participants for classes, programs, et cetera. 43% of those participants were led by senior center staff, 18% by volunteers. So our bingo groups, our card groups, those are primarily volunteer-led. They can put things together and they run the classes. 30% are self-directed by the seniors, so those coming in to use our exercise room, shoot a game of pool, play some ping pong, and then 9% are by outside agencies. Lynn Benton Community College has a couple of exercise classes there. OSU Extension Services comes in and does some classes, but that's what that's comprised of. Up there on the highlights, you also see over 50,000 meals will have been served outside or from the senior center. So that program is run through Cascades West Council of Governments, housed at the senior center. Part of those meals are at our congregate meal site. People come in, they get to eat a meal together, a nutritious meal together. Oftentimes they'll stay and participate in classes that we have going on at the senior center. And then the others are delivered throughout the community. Right now, I think they're averaging about 175 meals delivered each weekday for homebound seniors, which is amazing. And I did not do any staff comparisons, but we have historically had a low number of FTE in the senior center, putting on a lot of programming. We have 7 focus areas: lifelong learning, exercise, nutrition, social events, arts and culture. We really try to hit all those focus areas. Our one full-time position, she primarily leads classes. 70% of her time is probably spent away from the front desk, the front counter. The other 30% of the time is at the front counter. Our shared coordinator position, she does the newsletter, she does some of the programming planning, she leads classes, and of course, when our one full-time person is not there, she's our backup. And then, of course, there's a portion of that for the director position. That covers it for senior center. If you have any questions.
The one thing I will add to or expand on there is that, when looking at reductions, any sort of cost reductions here in the senior center beyond, what we've got on the screen, certainly as far as the kind of redistribution of FTE would likely result in significant program cuts because you only have really that one full-time dedicated person that can actually provide programming in that building. So that is a hard job to have one person not furnish, but to support that many seniors that are coming into the building. And that's the dedication, I think, of our staff and of Kendra to provide that service. And again, additional reductions there would truly start to impact that service.
Shall I move on to Lynx? Lynx Transit, the board has heard from me before. We've just continued to increase, trying to meet demands of the community. You'll see a chart up there that shows the increase over the last few years. 2022, we had our first significant increase, hit just over 30,000. It was like a 36% increase over the last highest year. Then last fiscal year, we ended with over 47,000, which was over a 50% increase. And then this year, we're projecting we'll hit at about 63,000. It'll probably be between 63 and 65,000. There definitely are some reasons why we've seen that increase. A piece of it is since COVID hit, we have not collected fares, so we're still fareless. Across the nation, a lot of providers went along those lines and weren't collecting fares or passes. And we've continued with that. Albany Transit has just made it official that they are continuing fareless just a few months ago. There are a lot of reasons to continue along those lines. The staff time it takes to bring the fare box in, to count the $1 bills, the coins, the passes. You have to have 2 people count that money. Then you have to bring it over to finance and they get to count all those coins and such. It's really kind of a toss-up of whether, that would just take more staff time. But we have seen those increases. Revenue projected this year is fairly stable as far as the grants go for operations. Where will we see the breakdown on that?
So if you want to see revenue items, you're going to look at page 281. Sorry, I have to talk into the mic. To page 281 will give you an idea of the Lynx Transit Fund, where all this is. Part of the difference compared to some of our other departments that have been up here presenting is this is entirely grant funded. It has its own funding mechanism to cover it. There is a little bit of a general fund contribution in the director's salary and benefits that we pay for, but otherwise it's often its own fund and self-sustainable. So page 281 will give you an idea of the revenue.
Perfect. And then I'll just give you a bit of a breakdown of those grant funds that are coming in. 250,000 are federal grant funds. 130 of that is for operations. It's 5311 funding, and it's for rural transportation programs. 120,000 of that is for our scheduling and dispatching software, which we'll be looking at purchasing and implementing this coming fiscal year. And $935,000 roughly is for the statewide transportation improvement funds. This group has heard me talk about that funding source before. That's that 0.01% payroll tax that anybody who works in the state of Oregon is paying into, and that was intended for new and enhanced transportation. So with that funding, that pays for our Saturday service, it pays for our expanded hours. We serve up to 5 miles outside the city limits. And then we also serve the Brownsville area 2 days a week. And then $66,000 is also that statewide transportation improvement funds. But what ODOT did was split that money up between a payroll base and a population base. So that $66,000 for population base is just a little bit separate, but it's all under that statewide transportation improvement fund umbrella. There's another $108,000 budgeted in federal funds. It's for Title 19 dollars. It's for providing transportation to seniors and those with developmental disabilities, help keeping them live independently, providing that transportation for work, whatever the case may be. And then there's also about $14,000 in there for vehicle maintenance repairs. It helps pay for part of the mechanic for the city. With the increases that we've seen and again, continue to try to meet the demands of the community, of course, our expenses are going up slightly. We have added a part-time dispatcher position to try to help, with coverage in the front office. Most days we need 2 people in the office during those busiest times of the day. We actually just hired this position, so we're happy to get them on board and trained so we have some more consistent coverage in the front office. So we currently have 3 full-time drivers, 7 part-time drivers, 2 full-time dispatchers, 1 part-time dispatcher, and then the 2, the director and the coordinator position that are shared with the senior center. Expenses also include $150,000. I mentioned that software and dispatching software that we're going to be receiving. Hopefully that will help gain some efficiencies with how we schedule rides. Not quite sure what that looks like. It could mean some iPads in the vehicles. It could mean a change of communication with radios. But IT is helping us walk through that process. There are a lot of vendors out there. It's really hard to compare apples to apples. There are so many different modes of service when it comes to transportation, fixed route, deviated fixed route, and so forth. So we'll find the one that will best suit our needs and move forward with that next fiscal year.
Kendra, can I ask about that?
Yes.
Is that the 153 in the capital outlay? My question was, this year we budgeted 575 and the projected is 20,000. And then next year we're budgeted 153. What was this year about?
That is for the software program. We had some other capital projects for this current fiscal year. One of them included the Lynx vehicle parking over at the maintenance yard. So that was roughly 570,000. We also have 30.
But we budgeted for that, but we're projected to not spend that?
We'll be spending it this year.
So our projected budget for the year on page 285 gives you a breakdown of that. We do show that we're going to spend that 570. That's our hope. We may have a small rollover as, it's still raining outside, so really hard to do anything with the parking lot. But
I don't have a page number. I just show the fiscal year 2024 projected capital outlay is $20,000.
Oh. Okay.
yes. Oh, okay. So the difference there is because that project we're not considering that project. How do I explain this? In your budgets, each of the areas has specific items that are related, they're operational costs. So for Lynx, the operational capital that we show in here is the 20,000. That project is not a departmental or not an operational expense. We house that in capital. That's why it's not showing up there. But if you do turn to page 281, is that the right page?
But we budgeted it.
We did budget it. We do anticipate that it will be spent this year in a different line, essentially.
Okay. So that maybe that shouldn't have been in that part of the budget originally.
Yeah, it probably shouldn't have been.
Moved somewhere else.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yep. Yeah, so actually looking at 285, that capital budget included some other equipment, 175,000 this year for other equipment and $380,000 for vehicles. I don't remember the specifics of those.
We actually received one of the vehicles earlier.
Early,
We actually
yeah.
received it the very end of June of last.
So
fiscal year.
$380,000 budgeted for a bus in this current fiscal year that you're seeing in your worksheets on that page 154, I think you said it was. That is money that we don't anticipate spending because we received the bus last year. It came early. And then there was revenue associated with that purchase because it was a grant. But it was too late at that point to change the budget for the year. So it was left there. That's why you're seeing an extensive capital budget last year and only $20,000 spent.
I will note, so I'm a part of the Lynn County Transportation Advisory Committee. That committee looks at the statewide transportation improvement funds that were allocated to Lynn County. So we work together as a group to determine how we allocate those funds to Lynx, to Sweet Home, to the Lynn Shuttle, to Albany Transit Services. So we'll be starting those discussions here in just a few months for the next biennium, 25-27. So there's not a lot of extra money coming, so we'll see how that goes, but hope to secure some more funding for that coming biennium. With that said, that's kind of Lynx in a nutshell, but I do have to say that I am very thankful for our Lynx and Senior Center team. They're fantastic. We genuinely care about the service that we're providing to our community, and I'm very thankful that we have staff that feel that way, and we'll continue to work hard to meet the demands of the community. Any questions about transit? Okay.
You do a great job.
Thank you.
We've been out of this about an hour and a half. Let's take a 5-minute break. We'll be back.
Here's your command voice. Slave driver. I never do. Has been broken. Yeah.
Are we back on? Testing.
How's it going?
Is it working?
Oh, I failed.
We're recording now. Yeah. Oh, now it's back to police.
All right. It doesn't sound like this is on. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You guys hear me?
I can, yep.
What?
All right, so our next department is the police department, and Chief Stevenson gets the glory of that presentation, so I'll turn it over to him.
Oh, thank you. Mayor, City Council, Budget Committee members. For those of you guys who don't know me, I'm Frank Stevenson. I've been with the city for almost 28 years now. Been in this position since 2009. As you all know, the police department budget consists of costs to provide essential public safety services through routine police patrols, criminal investigations, crime prevention, and other law enforcement activities. We won't go into the other law enforcement activities because then we'll be here all day. I have to say that over the last 2 years, this has probably been one of the most difficult years that I've been in this position. A lot of that is due to just the low numbers and low staff that we have had. You'll see in the budget that, kind of switch gears here a little bit, but you see in the budget that most of my materials and services hasn't really increased that much. We're pretty much status quo. It's raised a few, just a few, but that's just normal stuff.
The police department's on 115, sorry. Page 115.
I was unsure of the page number, so thank you. Where was I? Materials and services, yeah, hasn't changed much. We pretty much kept it status quo. One of the key challenges and work plans and work items for the next upcoming 24-25, obviously, personnel costs. It's a significant increase in the general fund. Most of those increases, though, are outside our control, right? And most of it is just due to rising benefit-related expenses citywide, as well as the PERS employment retirement system.
higher workers' compensation, et cetera. We've seen an increase in the area population. That's resulted in subsequent evaluation and overall actually the overall crime rate has increased. And a lot of that is just due to the number of the population increase. While the numbers of sworn positions remains at level, or we actually remain level below best practice standards. The current best practice standard, according to the national average, is 2.4 officers per 1,000 population. When fully staffed with 25 sworn police officer positions, and with the city's growth swelling to a population of 20,337 and change, that puts us right at 1.2 officers per 1,000. That's quite a lot of work for these officers. Significant challenges that, we're a relatively young department with over 50% of our active patrol officers is less than 3 years experience. If you guys have all known, we've been extremely short-staffed over the last few years. We're slowly getting those numbers back, but with that, it also creates young officers, and it takes probably about a good year and a half from start to finish when we hire somebody to when we get them solo status, about a year and a half, and that's when it works out. We're currently down one position in our communications, which is our dispatch center. We're down 3 positions in our patrol officer positions. So we're slowly gaining those back. At one time, I was down 9. So some significant challenges upcoming. Like other communities, we've seen a significant rise in complex, intensive calls, such as mental health, social unrest, and houselessness. It requires more resources and more follow-up, and as a result, which is unfortunate, but many of the property crimes and low-level offenses are not being able to be followed up as they should be. Focused proactivity like preemptive traffic stops been reduced. It's just an unfortunate side effect with low staffing levels.
Great. Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Mental health looks like it's way down this last year. Is that, are they being put into some other category?
We
went 394 then we went 332, then last year 241. So I thought those have to be categorized someplace else.
Yeah,
We're very mentally unhealthy. I mean, if you...
It's just a matter of, we've been working a lot with, thanks to our community policing division, right? As Dela and Dave, they've really kind of shifted towards really focusing in on them and providing them the resources that are needed. So it has been a slight decrease, but nonetheless, it's usually very labor intensive.
It's not a decrease in activity. It's just a decrease in how we're handling that. So
Correct.
That's what I hear you say.
Yes.
And that makes total sense to me.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. As far as, you touched on the community policing, but the call volume and crime trends, it does continue to increase, furthering the need for more sworn officer positions. I have a graph that's included with the document it showed, and what that is just information I've collected over the last 5 years, and is narrowed to depict the most significant trends, including types of livability crimes, use of force incidents, contrasted with the number of sworn officers, arrests, traffic sites, traffic crashes and reports, overall population numbers, and the calls of service / population and sworn personnel levels. And you'll see the last 2 years, it was 12, I believe, last year, and 13 officers this year that were handling over 16,000 calls of service. You guys can do the math on that. It's these officers are running and gunning, per se. So
One of the things we brought up last year and kind of we're still continuing into this year's major project was getting a new radio, handheld radio system, which allows us, it's what they call a tri-band radio. It allows us to communicate with outside agencies when officers step out of their car. We're still trying to dial that in to make sure that they are working appropriately. So that's been a huge project. That along with trying to hire the right police officer for the city. The jail is still closed. We closed that due to it was kind of a combination of lack of resources with personnel and due to the amount of work that it takes to run a jail. Insurance-wise, you need to have the proper first, you have to have the proper personnel to work inside the jail. You got to have mental health. You got to have nursing available, and not to mention the way that we were running it. Although we made it work, it just wasn't conducive to what the community needs. What the community needs is police officers out on patrol, not out on patrol / coming in and checking on the housed individuals on every hour. So. The jail is presently closed. We are working, as you all know, working on ways to try to get that back and get that back open, as it does make a huge impact. We've seen a number of thefts. You'll see the number of thefts in my graph has climbed dramatically, as well as car or prowls, just people out and about. And that the jail was a primary tool to use to house those individuals that are committing low-level crimes here within the city and hold them accountable. When the jail is up and running, it's 12 beds. We, on average, it was full, and those individuals that were housed there, we had programs that were made available to them, like work crew and such, and things of that nature. So when it is up and running, individuals are being held accountable and are actually giving back to the community in a sense through graffiti removal and going out picking weeds and doing things of that nature, just to kind of get them on the right track. So. But currently, where I'm sitting right now is, again, I have 3 positions that are needing to be filled with police officer positions and 1 position in my dispatch center. So in total, we have 4. But we do have a few. We have 2 in the background phase, and then 1 that I believe is going to be starting in June. So hopefully, with all that, we can get those numbers back to where they need to be. But I mean, even with 25 sworn police officer positions, we're still not even close to the national average of where we should be.
What's a Part 1 crime, Frank? I don't know what that is.
That's your major offenses. That's your burglary, thefts, homicide, robberies.
I got you.
So yeah,
I've done most of these. I didn't know what that was.
yeah, and you see that number is yeah, you've done most of these. Yeah, you see those numbers have slightly increased as well.
Thank
you. With that, I'm free to answer any questions you guys want to throw at me.
Can you hit me with that staffing stat again?
What's that?
Can the staff stat, you said what the national recommended was versus where we are. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, sure. It's 2 let me make sure I get it correctly. 2.4 is the national average or the national standard.
And you said we're at, KJ said 1.2?
1.2. Yeah,
Okay,
so
thank
it's
you.
2.4 officers per 1,000 is the national average or the national standard. And we've always been held, I mean, since I've been around, and it's always been pretty low. But this upcoming year has been, I mean, it's lower than the last 2 years. It's been
I think
lower.
the highest I've ever seen is like 1.76 when you were fully staffed at one point.
Yeah. Yeah, at one point we were close, but
Yeah, that was full.
yeah. Chief, do you have a ballpark figure or guess on, as far as personnel costs, what the dispatch center costs the police department?
I would roughly say my 800.
It's about
I
$800,000
was
a year
gonna
for the
say seven.
personnel side of it.
Okay.
And that doesn't include then any necessary software, hardware, and the stuff to operate it specifically, but personnel wise, it's about 800,000.
One of the things that I looked at, obviously when we were talking about budgetary issues was, what does our dispatch center look like if we were to outsource anything of that nature, which I wouldn't recommend doing. But at the same point, looking at that, you're looking at probably about some odd $2 million project just to get us into a centralized dispatch type center. We'd have to switch over all radios, all computer equipment, and to the tune, I mean, you start talking about technology and computer equipment and radio issues and then a whole nother frequency. It's the costs just skyrocket. And not to mention, you don't really get the level of service that you get with the employees that we have working in our dispatch center.
Thank you. Any
Any
other
other
questions?
questions? I thought I was going to get grilled up here, you guys. Come on.
Try harder. Come back tomorrow.
I will be. Anything else? All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you.
All right, last on our list, this is going to be a tag team effort by Ron and Jason. They're going to present to you the engineering and public works departments. We've combined them because they work a lot of times hand in hand on various projects, utility needs, the works. So they're both going to kind of talk to you about those sections. Of course, I didn't pull up a page number.
121.
Thank you. Starting on page 121, Public Works initially in the budget book on that 121 is combined as an entire unit. And then we've got the broken out sections, the divisions within Public Works. Engineering itself starts on page 89. So we may bounce back and forth here between these, but that's where you can find both these sections.
You want me to start?
No, you go last.
Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Nice to see you guys. Public Works Department for the operation and maintenance section. It consists of 9 different functions within that. Those functions are parks maintenance, streets maintenance, stormwater collection, water distribution and treatment, wastewater collection and treatment, building maintenance. I doubled up on one there, so 8, and we have a budget of $9.5 million roughly, which is $666,000 more than last year. That increase is kind of to help us fill out our filter racks at the water treatment plant, which are mainly we're doing solely because of the drawdowns that we've been battling with Green Peter Reservoir and our water source. That's where we'll see the biggest portion of that. The first fund I'll talk about is our building maintenance and mechanic fund. This fund consists of 2 full-time employees for custodial, 1 electrician / building maintenance HVAC guy, and then our city mechanic. City mechanic was new this last year, and it seems to be a great addition for all departments. We're up in revenue 50, or up in expense 53,000 versus last year. And that's kind of primarily because we really didn't know what to expect when we added the mechanic. And we have some larger maintenance concerns and projects with some of our buildings' HVAC units that we'll be handling as a result of that. I'll just kind of go through these. Any questions on the building maintenance mechanic fund before I move on? Okay. Parks is on page 132. Our Parks Department, I think it's 2 months ago, we had an opportunity to make some moves to utilize 2 of the staff members from that 4 full-time employee section in other areas within the city. One went to our collections department and one went to our water department, where there were existing vacancies we hadn't filled because we were kind of forecasting the general fund problems and assuming we may have to make some adjustments. So we're down to 2 people in our parks department. We take care of 371 acres total. Out of those, 288 are undeveloped, but we still mow them all. 83 are developed park acres. In that property, things that I worry with our recent adjustments to staff that we'll really have to manage well, like things like playground safety inspections and repair and replacement. In this parks fund, it's $207,000 reduction from last year. And this budget includes nothing for any future replacements of equipment, of playgrounds, of buildings. It's just simply maintaining what we have. Any questions about parks?
I do have a question. I'm trying to find it. Showing parks income. It's in the parks fund section. Give me a second here. Okay, so camping, where'd that go? It was camping fees and fees. Now I can't find camping fees.
So page 163.
There it is. Okay. So there's like a switch over. It's bouncing between camping fees and camping fees monthly. Could you just kind of explain that? That's an income, I assume,
Yes.
but it's only on one line each year and it's bouncing back and forth.
Yeah, so the biggest movement that we see there, Jeremy, is right now we have 6 spots that we'll rent as a monthly site, and that's it. And that's down from filling the park in the winter with monthly renters. We're currently in the middle of a fee review, going through to see what the market will bear for our fees for our campground. We're a little low right now, so that's something that'll come back before council at some point. There's been a law passed, I think it went into effect January 1st, that anybody that stays in our park for more than 90 days is considered a tenant. And then we fall under landlord-tenant laws. And it's really not a business we want to get in.
Right.
So we'll limit that moving forward.
I was just interested more in the line item, camping fees versus camping fees monthly, because in 23, there's 0 camping fees and there's 176,000 in monthly. And in 24, there's 135,000 in camping fees and there's 0 in monthly.
And I think some of that's just how it got placed into the budget.
Okay. Is it referring to the same?
They're essentially the same thing, right? The monthlies are going to be more of your long-term campers, I guess we'll call them.
Yes, we're call them
versus
campers.
your short-term, I'm coming to stay for the weekend kind of thing. The monthlies are your long-term folks that are sticking around. The camping fees line is going to be for those that are just coming on a short term. Some of it's the accounting system, right? And so we'll place it in one line for the budget for the display purpose and then break it out based on who's in the site and who comes around. So that's the primary reason you kind of see that bounce around a little bit.
Okay, I was assuming it was the same.
Yeah. It's the same revenue
Yeah,
stream.
same revenue stream. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing I want to add real fast on that is one of the biggest changes too for the revenue line and related to parks is the loss of a contract with the school district. The school district has decided to maintain their facilities on their own in the coming fiscal year. That contract to us was about $155,000 a year, and that's also part of the drive behind kind of the staffing changes. And I'm glad that we were able to kind of reallocate staffing based on available positions. But that contract is certainly part of what is facilitating some of the changes, right? And 155,000 is more than just one FTE. And so instead of being able to just lay one off, reduce FTE, it came down to two to kind of keep that budget from inflating more. But again, then that does cause complications on our side, the city side, in regards to can we maintain the parks that we have with just those two people? And that's going to be extraordinarily difficult as we go through the next fiscal year.
And I think thanks, Brandon. I think the biggest difficulty is gonna boil down to the 50 miles of trail we maintain. When we have a structural problem with one section of trail, that I can think of two large projects that need to be done that are gonna cost us $1 million plus to fix. There's no mechanism to fund any of that. So at this current point, when that becomes a complete failure, which is going to happen, that means we put a barricade across each end and close it.
Can you get a little more specific about what trails you're referencing?
I can. Cheetah Lake, the trail that runs from the Community Foundation old property back to the lake. There's a large section of that that is right up against the City of Albany Canal, and that is breaking off and going away. The erosion that we've seen in there is a concern for us. We've got some large surface cracking of that trail section. Right now it's safe until it's not. Additionally, out there on one of the islands, we paved through a fir grove and built some trails through a fir grove. And we lost one of those large fir trees this last winter in a storm. And that root heave caused by that tree falling over has severely damaged the stability of one section of that trail. And that's not addressing any of the regular maintenance or cracking that comes with having asphalt surfaces in the Willamette Valley. Any other questions in parks? Okay, next will be water. You can see that this fund is a $3.4 million, on page 136, I'm sorry. Water is our water collections and our water treatment facility. It's a $3.4 million budget, up $623,000 this year. We've kind of discussed that in the opening, filling out our filter racks with 86 cartridges to allow us to treat and meet demand during high turbidity events caused by drawdowns from Green Peter Reservoir.
Can I ask, I'm so sorry, can I ask about that a
Please.
little bit?
Yeah.
Is there movement in trying to recover some of that from the parties involved in forcing that upon us?
We've really been working hard at doing just that. I don't know what else right
I mean,
now that
if
we
we
can
can't,
talk
we
about,
can't.
but we are.
Okay,
We are actively pursuing some help.
okay.
Our water section, as far as distribution is concerned, is going to face some additional challenges with the lead and copper mandate given to us by Oregon Health Authority, which states every meter connection we have, the city now needs to know what the material service is on the private side of that meter, catalog it, inventory it, and then continually monitor and send out mailings to those customers that have, say, a galvanized water service. What we don't know is after this first round of regulatory you shall do is done, what that looks like in the future, if they're going to ask us to participate in replacing customers' private side water services, there's no guidance for that at all right now. But that is something that I worry about a little bit because it's so
We don't know
unknown.
what kind of unfunded mandates they're going to throw at us, is what you're saying.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. We're actually,
Jason?
So,
Yeah.
so I have a question. So the water delivery system is owned by the city, is that right?
Yes, to the meter.
Okay. So I'm kind of curious, and I don't understand how this all works. Why is it that they have to pay a franchise fee to the city if they're owned by the city? How does that work?
You just asked my favorite question, Lance.
So part of so the franchise fees are collected by all utility providers in the city that operate within city limits. So you have electricity providers, telephone providers, and part of the idea is those utility lines. The utility system is self-sustaining. It is what we call an enterprise fund. So it has to generate its own revenue and support itself with that revenue stream, right? And none of that revenue can go to support, say, other city departments. However, the idea is that those utility lines are in the city right of way and require repair and work, I guess. It's a similar for all franchisees that they contribute. It's essentially they're renting, I guess we'll call it, our franchise or our right of way. They're operating in our right of way. They are digging up our streets potentially at times in order to get to their utility lines or pipes. So our water system and our collection system are similar in that mindset that they're in our right of way, they're using our resources, they're digging into our streets, they're a part of a self-sustaining system. And so the city decided long ago that there should be a franchise fee from those three utilities, I guess, the storm drainage also, similar to the other franchises.
Brandon, does that go into the general fund, the franchise fees?
Yes, it is.
Second favorite question.
So I guess, Lance, I'll try and answer your question even more in that I think it's a way to get the water utility is chipping in a little bit. So when you're paying your water bill, you're chipping into the general fund a little bit to help to pay for some of the other services like payroll, that kind of stuff. So it's helping fund that. Is that correct?
It's different. So the utility funds also do provide support to the internal service funds, which we'll go through tomorrow. But the franchise fees, in a perfect world, I'm going to use the Republic or our trash franchise, for example, for a second. In a perfect world, the trash trucks are driving down our streets, right? And so you would take the franchise fee, shuffle that over to streets, because their trucks driving on our streets are deteriorating at a faster rate than what a car would our actual street infrastructure. The franchise money that we get from the electric company, you would ideally put into, again, the street fund to pay for the lights, the street lights that are around town. However, most organizations across the state, municipal organizations, don't. All that money just goes into the general fund because it is what's the word I'm looking for? That's a discretionary fund. The general fund is discretionary in that the council and the budget committee get to establish how funds out of the general fund are spent versus, say, the water system, where that can only support the water system. And so those franchise fees are supposed to go towards helping kind of support the necessary, Ron might have to back me up on some of this, the necessary functions of this organization to put that infrastructure in the ground or to maintain potential agreements with property owners to get to various various right-of-way access.
So franchise fees were almost every city charges themselves a franchise fee, right? So if you have a water and a sewer system, and the idea behind the franchise fees was just that. So we collect franchise fees from different utilities to repair streets, do various things, sidewalks and whatnot. That's what they were intended for. I'd love to tell you that that's what they're used for. Back a long time ago, it's probably, I'm going to say 15 to 20 years ago, we had a certain percentage of franchise fees that went to street preservation projects. as costs continue and the way that Oregon's structured with their property tax laws and how much property tax we receive, it became apparent that that wasn't going to it wasn't going to fund the general fund activities. So those franchise fees basically augment what's happening in the general fund. They were intended for that, but as Brandon said, that's a discretionary fund. And as you'll notice this year that in the budget, we've actually taken those fees from 5%, which we had, up to the 7%, which is standard of all other franchise utilities. So hopefully that kind of gives you a little bit better idea of what they're used for and how most all cities use them. That's kind of where we're at. Okay.
I have a question about cartridge replacement. Is that in materials or in capital?
It'll be a capital fund.
So
It's money that we've been saving since our plant was constructed to replace filter cartridges. We're using it earlier. So we're using a portion of it earlier to fill out our racks because our filter racks aren't completely full of cartridges. We've left blanks in the middle. As our need increased, we would add capacity that way. But our need during the drawdowns is such that we can barely meet demand this last winter, and it's just not a comfortable place to be in.
You'll see that line on page 138, the $1.1 million capital outlay line. That is the water filter add-on.
Not to beat a dead horse to death, but is there conversation as well as some remuneration from this last mess to mitigate on the next drawdown, which is most certainly going to happen unless they get a different judge?
No,
Is that discussion taking place to mitigate the effect it has on us this coming year?
That is, we are looking at a lot of different avenues to help us, maybe even adding pre-treatment at our water treatment plant to help settle out those large amounts of solids that come in.
But as far as this year, there is no mitigation for this year. We're too late for mitigation this year. Any project that we do out there is going to take 2 to 3 years to kick off. Where we're at right now, and it's public knowledge, we've filed a joint litigation effort at some point here with the city of Sweet Home. And we're moving through that process. That's about all we can say about it in this session. But we are moving that forward. As with any litigation, it takes a lot of time. So that's why we're jumping out ahead in the hopes that, yeah, we'll see some kind of help in that. But first, we've got to make sure we can provide water. So we are moving that forward. There's just not a lot we can say about it.
But adding the filters is our immediate stopgap. That's the thing that was easy for us to do with money that we already had to get us to ensure that we make clean drinking water for the citizens. And that's all we could pull off this year. Yeah, it was, we'd never seen anything like it. Any other questions about the water fund?
Yeah, I have one more question. So looking at just surprised I didn't see any line item for chemicals.
It's
Oh, sorry, go ahead. It's in materials and services.
It's combined with that department operating expense. So department operating expense will cover anything that's required for the operation of the plant. And that's where you'd see all the chemical stuff built in.
Good to move on?
I have one about parks. I know we already went past that, but now I want to go back because someone else prompted or reminded me about this. So in the planned capital expenditures, we have the 4.4 million for Cheetah Lake Park improvements. Can you walk me through that really quick? And I don't know where it is in the back. And can any of that fund the park improvements piece be used to fund like those pieces in Cheetah Lake that are the trails that are eroding?
Not the rehabilitation. So that's the
Okay.
problem with grants. Grants are geared for
Very specific.
new construction, new services that previously did not exist. I would really like to see that change at some point to a rehab grant. I just don't know what the political appetite for that is right now. But no, that money is a grant.
Was this
And
the
then we
one
use
from Replicate?
SDCs.
Is this the one from the state rep? Okay.
Yeah, 2.6 million of that is money that came from the state of Oregon for ADA and other park improvements related to Cheetah Lake. And so it's got a very specific use attached to it, similar to our other grants. But that's where that funding is coming from currently.
So if that's 2.6 is our responsibility, the extra that's in there? 'Cause
So,
it's 4.4.
yeah, so what we did, there's actually about 2.3 left from that grant from what we did with the water line extension out to the park this year. And then we assumed, I think, 900,000 for a large government grant that we just applied for. So we're basically setting this up to where if we get the grant, then it's going to be about 4.4, and then the rest would be out of Parks SDCs.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Which Parks SDCs, again, can only be used for
New.
increased capacity
Yep.
for population growth.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Next, we will jump to page 140, storm drainage. This fund was newly established in 2020 or 2018, maybe, somewhere right around in there.
Yeah, somewhere in that time.
And
frame.
it's relatively low revenue generator. It's a fee. Everybody in the community pays. We don't do a lot in here, but mow and maintain open ditchways, which we have a lot of miles of that in our city. We take care of catch basin and storm line cleaning. We kind of augment this with our collections crew. When they're out with the Vector, they'll do some of those cleaning projects for us. It has one full-time employee. And we're kind of trying to build some funds in there so we can do some projects that we know are coming down the line. So we're kind of saving our money right now and just repairing what we have to repair, doing what we have to do as part of the projects. Any questions about storm? Okay. Our wastewater fund consists of our wastewater collection from the home to the wastewater treatment plant, as well as the treatment of that material once it reaches the plant. We have an increase in cost in that fund expenditure, 234,000 this year. Kind of keeping up with chemical demand. We've changed some staffing around to better serve both plants. Now that we're responsible for both plants, we're able to use personnel back and forth to wherever the needs arise, which has really helped us. Our big focus in wastewater from the maintenance standpoint is infiltration of rainwater or stormwater into our system. We see every rainstorm at the wastewater treatment plant. So we'll go from treating 3 million gallons a day to 15 million gallons a day in a storm. So we're spending a lot of money treating rainwater. So our focus has really shifted into finding that infiltration. And the largest culprit that we're finding is sewer laterals from the homes. So we've got a comprehensive program to go out and help homeowners replace those sewer laterals so we can eliminate some of these I&I problems. That's worked out really well for the community and us. We see the difference. I'm really fond of that program. That's been a great program. And I hope we continue that one.
That's been, what, 15 years maybe that we've done that?
Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah. A long time. And it's making a difference.
Yeah.
I think right now our biggest challenge in that fund is the costs are coming back so high from contractors just because of what the market can bear, that we're doing a lot more of them in-house with our wastewater crew, just because we can't afford some of these laterals across the board. We have so many requests for them every year. We do have some large projects coming up at the wastewater plant. I think we'll talk more detail tomorrow about. But do you have any questions about the wastewater collections or treatment?
Is wastewater, you guys just got a big award. Like you did something big, good.
Well, that was water we wouldn't want, is the best tasting water.
Oh, I was thinking, was it? Because you had an employee that won an award.
Treatment plant operator of the year, the
Okay, yeah.
wastewater treatment plant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the water treatment plant, both are operators won employees of the year,
Yeah, awesome.
or
Good job.
treatment plant operators of the year. Yeah, I'm very proud of them.
I have a question on the wastewater. So I hear a lot of, every time we talk about the wastewater treatment plant, how much it's costing us to meet the permit requirements. Could you give like a general overview of what they're talking about when they say the permit requirements?
So the permit requirements that we struggle with the most at the wastewater treatment plant are solids removal, percent removal of TSS, which is suspended solids, when we have those large rain events. So the amount of volume of material that comes into the plant is so high, and it's clean water. I mean, it's rainwater mixed with sewer, that our percent removal for the volume is too low, and it's actually a permit violation, even though it's rainwater. That's one of our large areas of concern out there. One of our other large areas of concern for permit violation is ammonia removal, just because of our aeration basins and the way they're configured and the size of them. There's several drivers that kind of scare us with that. When we have those large events, we have that large inflow into the plant, chlorine contact time before we have to hold the liquid stream after it's gone through a clarifier. We have to hold it for a certain amount of time with chlorine dose before we can then remove the chlorine and send it to the river. That's another area we struggle with. We've got a good handle now on making sure we can meet all those benchmarks. It's just, we're right there. And we're in the process of renewing our permit, and we have no idea what the new one's gonna look like.
Now, the permit's a state, we're trying to meet state requirements to get this permit, correct?
Department of Environmental Quality.
State or federal?
State for
Okay.
us, yeah.
And I guess what are the consequences if we don't meet the permit requirement?
Well, there'll be a penalty, a civil penalty given to us. They're not giant, depending on what the violation is. Right now, we're still in good enough graces with DEQ that we'll get an enforcement letter, make some corrections, and move on. How long that relationship lasts, I think we're going to see some penalties moving forward from things that have happened this last winter. It's a slow process with DEQ, so I'll have to bring that back to you when we get it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have another question on wastewater utility.
Chlorine costs is our largest driver. The amount of chlorine that we use, and then subsequently the amount of bisulfite we use to remove the chlorine from the water stream, those are tied right at the hip. You're welcome. We are looking at ways to minimize costs at the wastewater treatment plant. Power is a huge cost out there. I think our power bill ranges around $30,000 a month because everything's pumped, and these are huge pumps. So we're working, Ron and I are working together to try to figure out a way to use some of our property to offset that cost, whether it be a solar plant, something different than what we're currently doing.
I'm going to add one additional thing to Robert's question. The utility franchise fee is considered a material and service expense also. That increase from the 5% to the 7% for the franchise fee is also what you're seeing reflected in that M&S increase.
And that goes to general fund. Any more questions, wastewater? Okay. Next, go to page 146, to our streets department. The $1 million budget paid for by gas tax at the pump. This is our portion of that Lynn County gas tax that we get. Our expenditures this year are down $67,755. We've had a really good last few years, since about 2021, 2020, of revenue coming in from gas tax. We've kind of got a bleaker forecast moving forward in the next biennium from the state. But right now, it's good revenue. And it is for sweeping, cleaning, tree trimming, signs, pavement markings, asphalt repair, as limited as we can do. We do partner with engineering a lot in this fund to do some overlay projects that are just desperately due. Streets is honestly the largest, most costly utility the city owns, and it's the absolute least funded. So with that $1 million, we pay for 3 full-time employees. We sweep the streets every day. The sweeper's not broken. And we take care of the rest of the things in the right-of-way, including right-of-way mowing this time of year.
So being that the gas tax is the only revenue source for that fund, the state has said that it's time to start kind of projecting a downward trend in that, as the state and the feds have pushed to a more fuel efficient vehicle and electric vehicles. Currently, obviously with an electric vehicle, you're not filling up with gas. So there is no gas tax that is being charged when an electric vehicle is driving down the road. And that is starting to hurt that bottom line. And what's going to happen, since that is a lot of cities' only revenue stream for street repair, is you're going to find that there's going to be even more potential disrepair of our roads because there is nothing to back it up. I know the state is investigating other options, albeit very slowly, on kind of additional methodologies for that to start to capture EVs as more of them hit the road. But so far, nothing has come to fruition. And so that is something that long-term is going to be a huge concern for us. Certainly the list of large concerns is not short with what we have coming for this organization, with where the future takes us. And unfortunately, as much as I wish it did, money doesn't grow on trees. So I can't just go out and cut down a few trees and ta-da, I have money. So this is one of those areas that you're going to see a dramatic decrease in what we can do as that gas tax dries up. And especially if the state decides to start keeping more of that, right? Right now, they are kind enough, quote unquote, to distribute some of that to the cities and counties. But certainly the ODOT has its challenges with funding and its vast expenditure budget. And you're starting to see less and less work on state highways and interstates. That's going to get worse for us as the state kind of keeps some more of that to fund what they need to fund as well.
We are.
So does this also include sidewalk repair?
Sidewalks in the city of Lebanon are owned by the property owner.
Okay.
We do have a program that we will, if it's there's a tree that's breaking sidewalk up, we've been going out and removing that tree, removing the broken concrete for the homeowner. And then the homeowner will replace the concrete with a contractor. There's not a lot of homeowners that could bite the bullet of the $7,500 tree removal and the concrete work. So that's been a good program for our community as well. We've gotten a lot done with it.
Okay, so you take care of the curbs and the wheelchair access ramps, but as far as the sidewalks themselves, that's the homeowner's responsibility.
Correct.
Okay.
And we do offer our help every chance we can. Public Works, it's a large group of funds. There's a lot of this community's money involved in these budgets, and we're continually looking at different models to make it work. I think we're kind of entering an age where what we've always done is not going to work anymore. So it's time for us to do some creative thinking and figure out a better way to get these projects done. And I know Ron and I have spent a lot of time looking at that. And hopefully we come up with something good. But that's it for me. You guys have any more questions? Oh, I did building maintenance. Yeah, I led off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the engineering department, like Brandon alluded to and Jason did too. Jason and I spend an enormous amount of time together, most of the time not by choice, but we do. We spend a lot of time planning and trying to figure out the best solution to projects, whether that be together or by contract. To give you an idea, the engineering department has about 6.8 FTE for the first 6 months of this year. We're going to drop that down to 6. I have a retirement and do not plan to fill that, partially because, well, actually wholly because of the increase in the franchise fees. We wanted to not hit the utilities with that. So by taking this person out of the and not filling it, why that frees up some money to then raise those franchise fees. 4.8, really, I'll call it 4.8, are primarily attached to our capital planning, our capital projects and facility planning, and then 2 to our development and general services. It could be any one of us doing whatever that day. But the capital side, basically, we try not to do too much design in-house anymore with the AutoCAD and the things that change. We're just not as fast at it anymore, and it's much cheaper to hire a consulting firm. We do most of our own inspections. Because that is a better way to do that. Plus, we're using public funds, and we want to make sure that those funds are spent correctly. Our development side, we do drawing review, inspection, permits, studies, right-of-way permits. We also do all of our environmental for the city, which includes our total maximum daily loading, which is a program put out by DEQ where we have to follow a bunch of stormwater rules and write reports and permitting as it goes through. All of us are funded through water, wastewater, sanitary, a little bit out of streets, and a little bit out of the development fund, which is basically fees, review fees that come in. That's where the funding comes from. Operational costs this year for the water fund, which includes personnel, is about 1.135 million. Again, that's for the 650,000 of that is for legal costs associated with the drawdown. We have about $84,000 in the drainage fund, and then another 1,150 or 1.15 million in the wastewater fund. 350,000 of which is for sewer lateral program that Jason talked about. We run that program through our office. And then another 328,000 in consultant services for the wastewater plant this year. As our new master plan comes online, we're going to start looking at getting those projects designed, or at least beginning to figure out what we need to do for design on those. moving on in ours. So capital projects for this year, if you look at page 8 of your budget document, you can see the list. This is not an extensive list or everything that could be included. This is the ones that we think that we're going to get to that we threw out there. And if you got any questions on any of those, please feel free to ask me what those are. We've got smaller capital projects that don't fit that 100,000 threshold. 100,000 is where we have to go to public bids and bring it before this body or the council for approval to bid as well as approval to award. Some of those include Airport Road, drainage improvements, Willow Drive storm drainage. We're going to start that this year. And then basically looking at our system development charges in the drainage program because we've got a new master plan there. One of the things that we've kind of hit on, and I think Jason hit on it there a little bit, was a way of doing business. In the past, we've avoided spending a little bit of money here, a little bit of money there to hire consultants to chase grants for us because it's hard to spend that money. But the reality is we don't have time on staff to study a 75-page grant application and figure out whether we qualify. So one of the things we're doing this year is we've set money aside in both water and wastewater to search for grants, have a consultant search for grants, and also write grants that we think that we would be eligible for. We're doing that through the COG, and then we'll have some specialized consultants that we'll look to for that as well. We're also looking at ways that we can get closer with our state and federal legislators because there is money to be had. There's money for funding projects through either the state or the federal government, and we need to do a better job of getting in line for that money, and that includes, I'll just call it lobbying. And so we're looking at mechanisms to where we can get have more of a voice at the table. It will also help us with permitting and things that come down through the legislature where we have an ear on the ground so that we can, we just did it here with temperature for wastewater discharge. We were able to provide comments to DEQ. Whether they're going to take into account any of our comments or not, we don't know, but we've at least got to make that attempt. And so that's one of the things that we'll be working really hard this next year to do. So we'll have different consultants working on that. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. And
I've been on this committee. Wholesale traffic ticket was down.
yeah, it sure has. Yeah.
How much does the cost went up?
I wish I could tell you. I don't know. So, so we're still working through the right-of-way issues.
I see that house is for sale.
Yeah, that side's fine. It's the north side now. So we're working through those. The design is done. Our intention was to go out in July, and it still is if we can get through this last piece of right-of-way. So that's what we're waiting on. It wasn't the design or it was strictly waiting on other people.
So July-ish. Ish.
I hate to even commit to it at this point because it's one of those where if we can't get the right of way, we can't move forward. And there's a mechanism to get the right of way. It's just a matter of
More ish than July.
probably, yes. So, but it is on the list to do, and it will get done. But it's just timing.
I have probably more of a comment than a question. I know there's probably people watching this or will watch this or may look over this budget and they can see these planned capital expenditures, and that's a pretty big chunk of money. And we're also going to be talking maybe today, but definitely tomorrow about, the overall deficit that's built into this budget this year. So I think it's important for people to see when they see those, to know when they see those planned capital expenditures, that is money that it's not general fund money. And actually, I'm going to stop right there and let Ron explain it.
Correct. These are funds that come from your utility funds, street fund. Give you an idea. So like some of our streets projects, 7th Street, for instance, It took us 3 years of saving street funds, you know, the gas tax that Jason talked about, just based on what we get every year. It took us 3 years to save up enough money to actually pull the trigger on the project. Same thing with Grant Street, the water line replacement. There's a whole host of things that come into play with that. You know, another thing you alluded to, the projects that have been on the list for a long time. We have to deal with so many different regulatory agencies, like the Grant Street project. I'll give you an example. So we designed the ramps because we got to do sidewalk replacement ramps. Anytime you do an overlay on a project, you are required by state law and federal law to replace the sidewalk access ramps to make them compliant with ADA. ODOT's come out with a new way of doing their designs, which is very strenuous at best, I'll tell you. And then on top of that, you're required to do cultural resource studies on all of these intersections where you're going to be doing excavations in a hard surfaced area. I know it seems odd, but that is the new rule. So this stuff takes time. Then you throw in pieces like the railroad where we've got to go under UP's railroad, and it could take a year to 2 years to get a permit to go under that. There is no time limit for them. We're at their mercy on a lot of this stuff. All we can do is push it along and see how fast we can get it done. So, and the funds you see here in the capital, those are all related to utility funds and street funds. There is no general fund money other than parks SDCs, but that, again, that's an SDC fund.
And you can find that on page 8. Page 8.
Yes, page 8. That's all I had.
Okay.
I think, is that it, Brandon?
That's all we have.
Okay. Any public comments related to the presentations, the budget? Seeing none. Committee comments. Do you guys have any additional questions, comments? I'm kind of actually wondering, Brandon, what tomorrow is going to look like.
So tomorrow we have a couple of guest presentations to start off with. The Lebanon Chamber of Commerce is going to talk about, similar to what LDA talked about today, the allocation out of the motel tax fund that goes to the Chamber of Commerce. And then we do have a group, the Strawberry Festival Fireworks Committee is going to come in and talk to you with a request of their own. So we're going to kick off tomorrow with a couple of those guest presentations. And then we'll bring it back to this group and we'll talk about internal service funds. And primarily what we want to hit there is the practice of those funds, what they're for, how they're operated, how they're funded. We'll talk about the utility funds, so we can talk about the ins and outs associated with that. Jason and Ron gave you both kind of the expenditure side of that, but we want to talk about, you know, what revenue goes into that, what the long-term future holds for the utility funds. And then last but not least, we'll talk about the general fund. And that's a conversation that we know is fresh on everybody's minds, and there's a lot to go into that. We want to make sure we cover the 5-year forecast, dive into, you know, what this proposed budget contains and why we have put in there what we have, and then move forward from there. So we'll go through those items, move into the public hearings, and hopefully tomorrow get to a spot where the committee feels they're in a position to approve a budget. One thing I would ask is if you are looking at this budget and you are considering, if you have 1, more questions, or 2, if you're considering some changes, let's talk about that. Not necessarily to deter you, as that's the committee's prerogative if there are adjustments to be made. But one of the things we want to make sure is that we are prepared to answer your questions, for 1. And 2, we need to incorporate that into this budget somehow before it gets approved. And so if there is requests for changes from this proposal, we need to have time among staff to be able to put that together for you so that you can see that in the manner that you're happy with, and we can allocate it to specific lines. So if you do have any of those overnight, let's talk about it. You all have my contact information, at least email address, and we can hash some of that out before tomorrow.
All right. Any other questions, comments?
Sorry, can I add one more thing?
I suppose.
Don't forget the Urban Renewal Agency as well. We spend a lot of time diving into the city budget, but the other part of this task that we have is that we have to review the Urban Renewal Agency and approve that budget as well. So if you need, for those of you with printed copies, it should be in the back past the blue page. Or if you're looking at it online, I sent out the link, and it's also available on our website. But make sure you've looked at that as well, because after we get through all the city stuff tomorrow, we'll hop right into the Urban Renewal Agency as well.
So today, we're not doing any urban renewal today.
No, there's not, what we'll cover tomorrow is basics. There's not a lot in the Urban Renewal Agency, but it needs to be somewhat reviewed. So we'll cover just kind of generalize what the expenses look like, any changes. That presentation piece should only be 20 minutes, I would guess, just given that it hasn't changed much. And then we'll go from there.
Okay.
Just
Alright.
on Brandon's note, I just want to drive that home that if there are any changes that anyone is thinking they want to make to this budget between now and I guess noon tomorrow, it would be nice to even for this committee to have a heads up that somebody is considering asking that before noon tomorrow or reaching out to Brandon before tomorrow. So just putting that out there if there's anyone that has any major things they're trying to make. And it does not appear that way, but I just wanted to put it out there now.
Well, I was going to see if we could somehow save $2 million.
Yeah, exactly. That's where I was going with the question. So,
Yeah, and certainly I think, those are the kind of conversations we need to have. I think this
Correct.
committee has to, the point of this committee is to review this budget. We make a proposal, right? Staff puts together the best budget that we can put together based on where we are at today, what we know the council has made as far as prerogatives for service levels, the goals that this organization has. But it is the responsibility of this committee to review and ultimately approve a budget. Do we hope that it's this proposal? Well, certainly, because that's what we have put together for you. But that does not mean you cannot make changes. However, we need to go through it and be able to discuss it as a group, put it into the appropriate sections and the appropriate lines so that when we do end up with an approval, it meets the state's requirements for local budget law, and everybody feels comfortable with what we are putting forward, what you as a committee are recommending to the city council for adoption.
How long would it take you to go over the general budget today?
The general fund?
Yes, sorry, general fund.
It wouldn't, I can't say that I've necessarily prepared, but we could certainly go through we have the pages in front of us, so we could go through it. I just don't have a PowerPoint presentation to walk through with you. So if that's what the committee would like to do, we can certainly make that happen. I would maybe ask that I get 5 minutes just to flip through the pages and get something put together in my head.
How about 12 minutes?
12 minutes.
give
will
the man
work great,
15
too.
minutes.
If that's what the committee wants to do, we can be
Well,
certainly
I
prepared.
just asked that because I think if people are going to want to make changes, today we just kind of went through department by department. We kind of saw what it was this year compared to last year and the year before.
Sure.
But I guess to get an overall feel for what we're actually up against,
Sure.
to have the general fund in front of us before we go in tomorrow, I think could be helpful for us as a group.
Okay. Yeah, we can definitely do that. I will say that the general fund is on tomorrow's agenda, so regardless of what we talk about today, we will need to make sure that we hit that tomorrow as well, so that if there are people who want to provide public comment or feedback, they get the same opportunity to do so, since it was noticed that way. But we could certainly put together kind of a where things are at and review some of it today.
Okay. And I also don't want to keep all the department heads here. Do we need to keep them for the general fund overview?
That's up to the committee. Certainly there are departments within the general fund, police department, community development, library, senior center, and municipal court. So those areas, if you're going to have specific departmental questions or operational questions, they are going to be the best people to answer that. Ron and I can make attempts, but we could also if we wanted to release them, they could go and we could, keep those questions and prepare them for tomorrow to follow up with. So that's kind of up to the committee, I'd say.
While I really want to do this too, I think like point of order, I don't know, can we? We can't amend the agenda. Can we amend the agenda mid-meeting to put this on the agenda is my point, when it's already been noticed for tomorrow. So,
Well, we will still talk about it tomorrow, but to get an overview of the general fund, can we not discuss that?
that's a good trade
Part of the-
question.
It is part of the budget.
So the city recorder says that you can, I certainly would recommend maybe there be a motion to open that agenda and add that line. You can make adjustments to agendas when you're in a meeting. But again, yes, I would also keep it on tomorrow so that folks who planned on coming tomorrow have that chance to say things. The other thing I will add, sorry, Counselor.
Go ahead.
The other thing I will add too is we could do that presentation tomorrow, and if we're not ready necessarily because of that discussion tomorrow to approve, nothing says we have to do it tomorrow. We could set another meeting on the books. I need time to notice it in the paper because that's the legal requirement, but you could have a third meeting at some point to formalize any changes you are trying to make as a result of tomorrow's presentation. That is another option, but again, I'll defer to the committee on what you all want to do today.
Are you wanting to get just a broad overview of the general fund, just for the committee, Jeremy? Is that what you're thinking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Because the question was put out there, hey, do we have any
Understood.
yeah. changes that need to be made? And I don't think people will feel the impetus to make changes unless they understand the gravity or the overall picture. If you're only seeing department by department, it's not painting the larger picture of what's actually going on.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's up to
The
the
only
committee.
thing is, are we gonna do it again tomorrow when we get more members in that didn't show up today?
I don't know.
Kind of their responsibility to
You're gonna
follow.
have to
You're gonna
go
have
through
to-
this again
You're
tomorrow.
gonna have to do it again tomorrow anyway.
I don't think anybody's gonna come in tomorrow and change it on the only day they're here. That
But if they're
seems a
gonna
little-
be asking for the information again.
I just understand the want to look at the 10,000 foot view of this now while we're here. It doesn't sound like it's gonna be a 45-minute, hour thing. If we could just go through and get a little overview of what this, I'm for that, but I can afford to miss the time from work. Maybe somebody else can't.
Does that sound like is that a motion?
It could be. I move to
Amend.
amend to the agenda that we are going to take a high-level view of the general fund in this meeting.
I second that.
All in favor?
I
Opposed? Two opposed? Okay, motion carries, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 2. So we will discuss the general fund 10,000 foot overview, but we're going to take a 10-minute recess.
15. Give them 15.
15-minute recess.
Some of you young guys are too slow in the bathroom.
I did, it's red.
Gavel it up.
Oh.
Good Jimmy show you how it's done.
There we go.
Earth mallet in there.
I had it. I was just getting a strong wrist when I was on the planning commission, but got weak again. Sorry to put you on the spot, Brandon.
No, you're not.
Actually, I'm not.
It's okay, that's what I'm here for.
Proceed.
All right. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is walk through our 5-year projection. It is a item in your budget book. If you have a printed copy, it's on page 176. If you don't have a printed copy, you can find it under Fund Summaries and General Fund, and it will be down at the bottom. So what we've put together for you is we have the last 2 years of actual figures, so fiscal year 2022 and fiscal year 2023. We have the fiscal year 2024 adopted budget, what we went through the process last year with, and ultimately the council decided to adopt last June. An estimated for 2024, and then we have 25 through 29 in proposed and projected figures. First, before we get into this in better detail, I want to highlight that this is a projection, and projections are designed to potentially change. We do everything possible to use our crystal ball and determine where market trends will take us, where salary adjustments and benefit increases will come from. But I will tell you right now that if I hit all of these numbers in the future fiscal years, then I'm going to go buy my lottery ticket because it's just not going to happen. However,
Used it up.
huh?
Doesn't work that way.
It doesn't.
Once you use up all your luck, it's
Oh,
gone.
it's just gone. Okay. Well, then I wouldn't win the lottery anyways. But that being said, right, this is the best idea that we have as far as what we know is coming in the future. So keep that in mind as we go through this. The top section of that talks about the beginning balance. You can see that over time, that beginning fund balance for the general fund starts to drop until you get to a spot where in 2028, the beginning fund balance is red with little parentheses around it. That is a negative number. And according to Oregon law, we are not legally allowed to budget with a deficit. So by the time we get to 2027, this projection says we have to take corrective action in order to ensure that we are not budgeting a deficit in the general fund. We'll go through the figures so that we know how we get there in this projection. Property taxes for next year, that's the first revenue line. What we have done for 2025, kind of that middle column there, is we have projected a 3% increase in assessed value, which is guaranteed by state law. And then we have assumed a 1% increase in growth, and that can be new properties coming online and entering the tax rolls. What we did for the 2024 fiscal year is we said 5% total. So the 3% assessed value growth and a 2% growth in market value. And I can tell you that what actually ended up happening was 1.8% instead of 2%. And when you're dealing with the hundreds of millions of dollars in property tax assessed value figures, 0.2% goes a long ways. So we're a little bit more cautious, I think, in this forecast, assuming that 3% and then the 1% increase in new property coming online. One of the items, let's see if I can do this here. Sorry, I have to change the screen share here. Oh, yes, Counselor.
When you're talking property taxes and your projections, does that include a projected default ratio?
Yes.
And what's that look like?
So in this forecast, what we have assumed, in the past, we had assumed a 4% default. So, and it's not even a 4% default, it's a 3% discount that you get when you pay your property taxes in full in November. And then we assumed a 1% default in those who are just not paying their property taxes. What we actually saw this year, and what we have plugged into this model, is that default figure has increased. We are seeing less revenue than we'd anticipated, less than what the county says we should be receiving if everything was going well. So this projection assumes a 3% discount and a 3% default rate for the 25 and 26 fiscal years, which adds to us not getting as much. So real fast, I want to cover this graphic that we put together. This is for anybody within city limits, this is $1 for every dollar they pay in property taxes. This is where it goes. Okay, and the misnomer certainly is that, well, I pay property taxes and you have all that. It's not necessarily the case, right? We get a portion of it, which is really only about 29% of that dollar. So the county gets 20 cents of it. The city of Lebanon gets 29 cents, and that goes to a whole host of other functions. It goes to the police department, the senior center, building and planning, economic development, municipal court, and library. The fire district right now gets 13 cents. They have their operational levy, their current levy, or not levy, but permanent rate, and then they have a bond payment as well. And then education actually gets the lion's share at 36 cents of each dollar that you spend in property taxes, and that goes to a whole host of other organizations as well. And then right at the end is this little sliver for the Lebanon Aquatic District and the Lynn County 4-H. So when it comes to property taxes, we certainly, we do receive a good amount from each property, but it is not, every dollar that maybe folks anticipate should come our direction. Let's see. So going back to our forecast, all of this information is built into the property tax line. Moving out into the future years, there is a 3% assessed value growth assumption. So 2026 actually has another one of the 4% increases. And then 27, 28, and 29 are all 3% assessed value growth. We don't assume any additional properties coming at that point. Some of that is based on the fact that as Kelly presented, community development is starting to see some slowdown in, permits and development applications and such. And so we have essentially been a little conservative in this estimate so that we don't necessarily overshoot what we actually have coming our way someday. Moving through the rest of these other taxes includes the 3% marijuana tax that we receive from any sales inside city limits. And then also a portion of the transient lodging tax, or more commonly known as the hotel or motel tax, that we get from those places. Franchise fees we talked about earlier. We have a small increase budgeted or planned in each of the outlying fiscal years. As utilities raise their rates, we get a little bit more because it is percentage based. So for example, Northwest Natural, our franchise agreement with them, I think we get 5.95% of any revenue that they receive. So if they raise their rates, we get a little bit more each time. In the franchise fees, however, I will mention telephone franchise, for example, is falling away. It is one of them that we plan for a decline year over year as folks move into cell phone world more and more. There's just are less phones, physical phones. And when you have a VoIP system or that voice over internet protocol, you're not getting any tax dollars or franchise fees on that either because that's really running through internet. And we don't get franchise fees on internet services directly. So that's a federal thing. Fees and charges for service is just that. As folks come in and they are looking to receive some sort of service from the city, there's usually a charge associated with that service. For 2025, it's $266,000 budgeted, but you can see the previous years have been a little short there. And I don't remember, I'd have to flip through the budget book. I don't remember what exactly goes into that and why that went up for the coming year. Oh, parks, we added parks, which I'll come to here in just a little bit. Excuse me, intergovernmental is money that we receive from either the state, usually through state shared revenues, or other neighboring jurisdictions. Grants and donations is just that, grants and donations. Fines and forfeitures is primarily in court. So you can see that revenue has actually started declining, and it has for multiple years. You had one little spike. We saw some increase, certainly pre this forecast, but also we've seen a little bit of money that jumped up in 2020. Looks like 24 was the adopted budget, that 286, but it's not coming to fruition. It's been declining year over year. So that is a long-term concern, and certainly that revenue goes to offset the costs associated with running our own municipal court. So that's something to consider as we move forward. Interest earnings are doing really well, but at some point the forecast does say that interest rates will start to come down. The Federal Reserve won't leave interest rates where they are. Most of the market thinks past this calendar year. Some of them thought that we'd already start to see some rate drops, but we haven't seen that yet. So we did hold steady in some of the interest. The reason you see a decline is as we spend more money, we have less money to make interest on. So we do have a small decline in the 25 fiscal year planned. And then the future fiscal years, a small decline as interest rates start to kind of level off or come back down to, I guess, what we'll call the new normal. And then miscellaneous revenue is anything that doesn't really have a line associated with it or no specific capture. What you'll see in this forecast is the operating revenue then, we're starting at basically $12 million. And there is an increase year over year. But what this projection shows is this increase is not keeping up with what our expenditures are increasing. So we had this conversation with the council over 2 meetings, one in March and one in April. They're 2 work sessions if you want to check out the video. But one of the primary thing that we mentioned is revenues increasing at about 4% each year, but you have expenditures that are increasing 8%. That doesn't math well. It just doesn't balance. And so that is the biggest concern that we have as an organization, is that at some point it's getting to we are starting to eat into that fund balance. And at some point we just don't have the money in our reserve to offset what we're losing. Shouldn't have eaten those chips. The pass-through revenue is just that. We receive money in the door and then it is promptly shuffled right back out. So that $310,000 then goes off to other jurisdictions, whether it's for fee collections and maybe we get to keep a small portion, but it's money in, money out basically. So at the end of this, you see total revenue. By 2029, we're up into the $14 million range. Total resources, it seems a little weird, but you're going from 14 million and your total resources are down to 11 million. That's because if you'll remember at the top of this, we have a deficit fund balance of $3 million. So we don't actually get to enjoy the revenue that we're bringing in because we're offsetting with a negative balance. For the rest of this, salaries, Social Security, Medicare, state taxes, a lot of this is set by factors outside of our control. So certainly salaries are either set by contractual or contracts, and negotiations with either cost of living adjustments, step increases, right? There's a salary schedule for each city employee. There are 2 union groups amongst the city, one for our police department, some of our staff there, and then one for general service employees. Primarily, that covers public works, library, senior center, most of our other departments. What you see in this salary projection, the increases are just a standard cost of living adjustment, which is anywhere between 3 to 3.5 so far throughout the past few fiscal years. And then the associated steps that any of those employees may get. Some people are topped out, and so they won't necessarily get those steps, but there are other employees that are newer, and with new employees, you have step increases each year. So those are plugged into this forecast. It's about a 4% increase each year in the salary line here, a little north of that, to accommodate those changes. Social Security and Medicare, there's no change in the actual distribution, but the increase is associated with the increase in salaries, because that's just a percentage that we pay off to the government. State taxes is a similar thing. PERS. PERS is a significant driver and will be one of our greatest hurdles moving forward. And I say that because what our projection shows at this point is a 27% increase in the amount of money that we are sending off to PERS between 2025 and 2026. The rate adjustments are made on a biannual basis. So every 2 years, PERS does their reports through an actuarial, and they establish what they consider an unfunded liability. So the idea is PERS, if everybody were to start retiring today and start tapping the PERS system, right now that system could send out about 80% of its payments before it wouldn't have money left to meet the rest of its obligations. As a result, all of the local cities, counties, special districts that are part of the PERS system, which is nearly all of them in the state of Oregon, have to pick up that unfunded liability. And the city of Lebanon is no different. Thank you. One of the items that is driving our PERS increases is just north of 20 years ago, the city signed on for a PERS obligation bond. And what that did at the time is essentially we took on debt to send a pot of money off to PERS to offset what our unfunded liability may cost us. And over that 20-year span, that money has kind of, I guess we'll say slowly, been eaten up until it is at the point where it is nearly gone. So we no longer have something that is buying down our rate because those funds have dried up. However, we do still have the debt outstanding through 2028. Current PERS projections say we won't make it through the next fiscal year with our obligation bond money. That side account, we'll call it, savings account, will have dried up. We'll have used it all. The city is reviewing an option where we potentially go out for another PERS obligation bond. But to be quite honest, there isn't anyone doing it. And the biggest issue is whether that's a palatable bond to sell. PERS obligation bonds 20 years ago were certainly appealing, and there were more organizations that jumped in. We were part of a list of organizations across the state that went out for that obligation bond, but they didn't pan out the way that investors had hoped for in the long term. And so they're not necessarily an appealing item for investors to purchase that bond and to carry that liability. So there is a question as to whether or not it would really do anything for us. Anyways, that being said, you see the largest jump between the 2025 fiscal year and the 2026 fiscal year. That's because that's when the newest set of rates kicks in. That jumps us from almost 4 million up to 1.8 million. You have one more year in which the only increase is related to salary adjustments, and then in 2028 you jump up another 27% again, assuming that the same increase will come down the line. And I will tell you that over the last several years that has been the case. The adjustments aren't going down, they're going up. So we have two 27% increases budgeted into this forecast. Health insurance and HRA. We assume a 6.5% increase in health insurance. Over the last two fiscal years, there was no adjustment. Our insurance provider through City County Insurance Services, a state kind of pool that lots of government organizations participate in, had no increases, thankfully. But this next fiscal year for 2025, they're telling us that we'll see a rate increase of 9.6% for next year. So the historical increase has been about a 6.5% increase if you take year over year assumptions. So that is forecasted in here as well. Other payroll expenditures include the money that the city has to pay to Paid Leave Oregon for that new program, and then any other small taxes and other items benefit-wise that we pay for. Total payroll expenditures, you'll see next year's budget, almost 8.2 million. This is assuming a full staff, right? Based on what we have presented to you in your proposed budget, this assumes all of the positions are full across the police department and the rest of them. So there is a potential for vacancy savings that will be one of those items that changes this forecast. But in a perfect world, we would be fully staffed, so that Frank and the police department have what they need, so that our senior center can keep its doors open, so that we can continue to provide the development services for folks as they come in. But a lot of that's a wait and see, honestly. Materials and service, we've budgeted a 1% increase. You do see a drop from 25 to 26, and that's related to the $300,000 grant that we were talking about with Kelly's area in community development. And then from thereafter, it has a small increase. Capital outlay, the only capital really that we purchase in the operating expenditures line is vehicles. This is police department vehicle replacements. So we've got some of that, and we have not changed that line. It stayed at 72,000 through the outlying years of the forecast. But I can tell you that those cars aren't going to just cost $72,000. That's going to probably increase over time as everything gets more expensive. Finishing off this forecast, debt service. So we planned $579,637 in the debt service line for the coming fiscal year. What that did is pay off a debt item that the general fund is currently paying for. We are hoping that not hoping, we know that by paying that off today, we save about $40,000 over the life of the loan. It was taken several years ago, and the general fund had to pick it up after the original financing structure changed. I don't have all those specifics, but the general fund has been paying that for several fiscal years. So we are hoping to tie that off in this in this proposed budget and be done with that, and save us some money in the long run. Transfers out includes transfers to our internal service funds for HR, payroll, finance, city manager support, council, IT, our building fund, and custodial, or not custodial, mechanic. As well as the debt obligation with our PERS obligation bond that will run through 2028. Pass-throughs we talked about earlier, and then an appropriated contingency. We do budget a small amount that we set aside for potential changes during a fiscal year. If somebody leaves, we have cash outs regarding their vacation accruals that we pay out, or if somebody comes in at a higher rate for some reason, then we have a little bit of money set aside that we have the ability to adjust a budget using that appropriated contingency. All that said, by the time you get to 2029, we estimate about $16.5 million in expenditures. If you'll remember up above, we only had $11 million in total resources available at our disposal. So that results in a deficit of $5.4 million by the time we get out to 2029. That is something that we have to change. And in fact, in this forecast, this column here with the first red number is 2027, only looking at this budget, really 2 short fiscal years away. So it is something that we've actively been engaged with trying to solve in some fashion. This proposed budget takes a decent stab at that, we believe. We're down almost 10 positions. Most of those impacting the general fund. So we've done what we think we can do without sacrificing overall service in order to try to extend this as long as possible. Ultimately, what we're saying is in 2023, that was the first fiscal year in which you had an actual sustained upside down balance at the end of the year. So we actually ate into our reserves by $108,000 that year. And as you can see, it does not get any better as you go through the rest of this forecast. Again, some of this has the potential to change, but this is the information as we have it today, and our best guess. And I might have to wait for the train to pass by.
Take a break. Just hold. So the other part of this too that we have to keep in mind is the city has a policy in which we have to put aside 17% of our operating expenditures into reserve. So this almost bottom line here, for 2025, we're saying that we need to hold $1.7 million in reserve. So if all goes well, that means at the end of the year, you really have a cushion, so to speak, of $1.2 million or $1,181,000. But when you get into 2026, we're required to hold $1.8 million based on our projected expenditures. And the ending balance then at that point is really $812,000 a deficit. So unless that city policy were to change, and that's a council action, unless that city policy were to change, we technically wouldn't have enough money at the end of not the 2025 fiscal year that you all are looking at right now, but the following fiscal year, to meet our policy obligations.
Now, I say that that's a council action and it sounds really easy, like you could change that 17%. However, that threshold is something that if you're going out for a loan, whether that be for the urban renewal district or for anything related to the wastewater treatment plant in the future, any loan that we try to take, they're going to, the rating agencies or the borrowers are going to look at our policies and our reserves and try to to determine whether we are a risky bet or not. And if we don't have some sort of reserve set aside, that will impact us from an ability to take on additional debt if we need it. So it is not a recommendation from my office, certainly, that we change that 17%, but I can tell you right now, we can't make that 17% in 2 fiscal years.
We do look a little risky. I'm
little-
going to say that's a
little
lot
bit.
of red.
A little bit. It's a lot of red. It is not certainly where we want to be. This is a problem that, certainly we brought to, I've only been here a year and a half. So I know we talked about it last year when I was here. It is something that we have been actively discussing with the council, our staff, the department directors have been incredible in trying to work together to find solutions, to try to do what we can to put some of this off. But it is at a point now where we kind of have hit that tipping point of without some either major structural changes to how we provide services in this organization or some sort of additional revenue stream, we can't do what we're doing today. And that's part of this budget. So right now, with the budget that you have before you, we are proposing a $1.6 million spending deficit, knowing that we need to find additional measures, whether internally or from external revenue, in order to change the picture in the long term. That was a lot of information, so certainly if you have questions, I'm happy to try to address them. But that's kind of where we are at today based on what you have in front of you.
Be clear though, this is not a situation.
It is not. This is a situation that a lot of government agencies are facing. School districts, cities. I can certainly use the city of Salem because they're going through this right now where they have a very large deficit they are trying to attack. And their first proposal, I guess, for how to solve that did well. So they are actively trying to work on another solution with a focus group and some outside input. But no, this is not something that is unique to this city.
Yeah, we went to that on Friday, and that was one of the talks that everybody's general fund is hurting right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just our size, it's everybody. Everybody's having to make decisions just like we're making right now.
School district, they've got.
Yeah. Primarily what this boils down to is the cities, local municipalities, and the current property tax structure. We don't have the ability to bring in what is necessary to provide the support that we need based on what folks are looking for, right? Measures 5 and 50 have really locked us in to seeing just these incremental increases in our property tax revenue without an ability directly to just change that model. And there are certainly other states that have similar things, but they have other benefits like, for example, when your house sells, then there's a change in value at time of sale. Oregon doesn't have that. Once that assessed value is set, it is set forever. And it does not change except for that 3% increase each year. So, or if you're adding on to it, if you add square footage, you're going to see an increase. But still, again, at a reduced amount compared to real market value. So there's a lot that hamstrings local government organizations like us. And this is not going to be a singular problem. And I worry too, the long term is going to be that hopefully not us, but somebody is going to likely end up failing before any real statewide action is going to occur, which is problematic, right? This is not, when you get to a point where you have deficit spending and you can't, you are basically looking at folks and shutting your doors and saying, we can't provide services that we have promised to provide you because we don't have the money to do so. And at some point, some organization in the state of Oregon is going to feel that pinch and it's going to hurt.
citizen. I believe Safeway,
Can you talk into the microphone? Sorry, like pretty close because they can't really hear you.
when I drive down from Safeway to Robbins Way, or no, when I see that explosive growth, any person is going to assume, because you're basically almost built out.
Sure.
Just that last McKinney apartments. You're going to assume that your property tax revenue is increasing incrementally.
Sure.
So my point is you're going to have to do a better job of explaining what happened there, because
Yeah.
most average thinkers like me see all that and I go, Shazam, that's a pot of money.
And it would be great, but I think the biggest issue for us and other organizations is that growth is we're automatically stunted in what we receive from it. Okay, so when it is built out and there's the county does an assessment and sets a real market value, the county average then set an assessed value on that is 46%. So we immediately lose 54% of the potential revenue associated with that construction because of the assessed value, the maximum assessed value. And that is then what we generate property taxes on and where we kind of go sideways.
But does the average citizen know that?
Well, no.
No,
Okay.
and part of our messaging, we're just walking through this over the last few months, and part of that will be in our messaging, and to build something for folks to see that how we got here, what we're trying to do to solve it, and that will be part of that message. Because if you take anybody's assessed value in, I think Jeremy and I have had conversations about this before, where you look at like a new apartment complex and you look at their overall tax, let's say it's $100,000 a year. Of that, the city only sees, from that up there, $29,000, right? So I think the fire chief used a really good analogy in one of his that to get 6 new firefighters, it took 1,000 new homes to come online, I believe is what he used on that. So we're not seeing that revenue, and you look at the cost, but you are correct. Our messaging needs to be a little bit better in that, but we're just now getting to the point where we're getting out ahead of this. So that will be part of it.
Well, it's not a big piece of the pie, but are your development fees what they could be? I've heard often that pretty reasonable compared to our sister cities.
We are. You got to remember, we're a not-for-profit. So for me to go in and charge development fees where we're making a profit off of it, I wouldn't feel good about that. We pay for the services that we provide on the development side. I mean, there's always ways that you could increase your right-of-way fees and such, but that doesn't really tie back to the general fund. The folks that are working out of those funds, it could on the community development side. And I think they're looking at fee changes this year, if I'm correct, Kelly. Yeah.
All those fees are charged in individual funds, and they have to remain there because they're supposed to support those functions, right? So if you're coming in for a development review, any fees you pay associated with that should go towards covering the staff costs to do that development review, but none of that is housed in the general fund, for example. And so we can't just take that revenue and move it over because it is what is considered a special revenue. It's allocated for that purpose. What comes into the general fund is property taxes, some charges for service regarding, related to building and planning, more so planning, because that's the expenditures we see on that side. Some from municipal court. But how do you look at somebody and say, hey, thanks for your call to the police department, but I need you to pay this charge for service in order for me to come out, right? It's not something that is done currently and hard to justify. So, all of that's certainly been something we have reviewed and looked at, but again, comes down to what is it that you can feasibly do based on what, service expectations your community has.
I think, I'm just a common citizen. I haven't done this very long. So the the restrictions on tax you're talking about are one thing, but it's the economy. If we get all of a sudden tax 100%, people would be outraged that their property taxes are going up so much. I mean, we just have to find, things are just more expensive. It's the economy. It's happening to everybody. We have to responsibly find a way to comfortably make it so people can stay here and have the services they deserve at a cost they can afford. Even though we are a low, median income area, we have to be sharp enough and do it. And with that comes at some point, the trust that people don't think we're hiding money in this. I mean, we talked about, we kind of laughed about it, that somebody would actually think we're padding our pockets with this. That's not what any of, all of us are citizens who live here and love this place, and we're trying to make it livable for all of us. And it's gonna cost all of us more, it just is.
What we're looking for out of the budget committee is, this budget that's before you, we do an annual budget, right? And so we are looking at 2025. And yes, there should be somewhat of an eye toward the future. But what we are looking for from this committee and is this budget, this proposed budget in front of you, a palatable budget? Is this one that you can look at and say, yes, I agree with everything that's in here. I know that it's going to eat, $1.6 million of our fund balance, but is that acceptable at this time to you? Or is there additional work are there additional things you're looking for? And that's part of the conversation that we need to have before we get to a point where you approve the budget, and then ultimately have the council adopt later.
Any other questions or comments? Thanks, Brandon. I just wanted to basically summarize what you just said. Is this spending 1.6 more than we're bringing in this year? And that gives us some things to, if we go over this tonight as a committee on our own, and you have questions for tomorrow, you have ideas or thoughts, I want us to start that process right now instead of last minute tomorrow. So if there's nothing else, this meeting's adjourned.